Okay, just one sec. Hey everyone, so I'm here today with Mario Greco. Now I'm just going to take a minute here to just make sure I post a link so that you can get involved. We're going to do a lot of discussion regarding the education system, the history of it, how it affects the students today, and maybe some of the possibilities that we can use to expand upon on the education system, because we live in the information age today, folks. Like, there's a lot more opportunities at our disposal for propagating particular kinds of education, and it actually can be beneficial to a lot of people at a much greater reduced cost. But I just want to, like I said, I just want to share this to my social media pages, so those of you who are paying attention right now can get involved. And like I say, when we get towards the end of it, I might even take a few questions if Mario agrees to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you so much for having me on your channel. It's I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, no problem, Mary. I'm actually very appreciative to have you on. Okay, just one second.
Thank you.
Here. All right. There we go. Okay. Actually, I'll share it right down here, actually, in a message there for you too, Mario.
Oh, perfect.
So if you just want, at least it's there and available. Okay, so.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Oh, I better close that or stop it, actually.
Oh.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so we're good on Twitter.
Perfect.
Yeah, I like to get people, even though a lot of them will end up watching later, I like to, get people if they want to watch kind of on the fly deal.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's good. I'll close that out. Close that. All right, perfect. Okay, I'm good to go. So you're all good there, Mario, right?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So as I was saying, I've been really looking forward to this conversation because, like I was mentioning to Mario, actually before we went live, is it's great to see, especially he's 27, so he's someone actually that's the same age as my oldest son from the millennial generation. And, I'm very appreciative of these younger folks today that are looking to the fact that, yeah, we have, there's lots of opportunities for education today. The fact that we're using that typical one-size-fits-all approach that maybe historically was somewhat beneficial, I'll admit. And I'll actually just start off right away by talking about the fact that the history of the education system in North America, predominantly Canada, the United States, not so much Mexico, but was someone, if you're familiar with Egerton Ryerson. So Egerton Ryerson was someone that was very much concerned about having some kind of education system in the Western developed world, such as Canada and the US. And so he went to all places all around the world. He traveled around Europe this was in the 1840s. And he realized that actually it was the Prussian, what would be considered today modern day Germany. But the Prussian model seemed to have a tremendous amount of benefits as far as creating, like I say, that kind of one size fits all approach, but it was completely conducive and aligned with the fact that this was during the post-industrial revolution. So you needed people that were, very much willing to do the division of labor. They also had to be shown to be conformist to, and obedient to leadership. So there were certain parameters that were set out in the education system at that time to produce, and it worked out as far as the utilitarian aspect, as far as, pumping out a lot of students that were at least competent enough to carry out their particular task for whatever undertaking or endeavor that they chose to go into, or particular field of occupation. The problem, of course, though, is as with anything, in the past, religion was the dominant aspect as far as education or as far as gaining knowledge. After, post the Enlightenment era, and when you did have academia kind of taking that role, you still have this problem. What I've always noticed is the problem is if you use a one-size-fits-all approach, or anything that can lead up to an absence of critical thought, then you end up with a population of citizens, whether, like I say, whether they come from a religious background or whether they come from a public education background. And sorry, I still, to this day, to me, it's redundant. Actually, it's literally this two sides of the same coin. Because as a person that was raised both in the public education system and because I come from a historically religious background, my family was very religious, Christian. We had what was called Sunday school. So, you know, when the older people were going to church, the younger kids were getting a different kind of education, which was through what they called back then was the Sunday school. Now, a lot of that did have to do with morality. It wasn't necessarily academics, but once again, it was still set so that there was certain parameters that you had to function within. You couldn't step outside the bounds of allowable thought in Sunday school. And that basically correlates to me, even in the public education system. I know myself, I was told that you were only allowed to think about how to solve a particular problem or equation in one way. There was so many times I had teachers where I would challenge them and say, well, actually, I can figure out a way to do that in a different manner, but I was only allowed to do it the way they told me to do it. And like I said, those things they seem contrasting because you're talking about a religious institution, and on the other hand, you're talking about a public education institution, but both of them failed miserably in allowing me to think critically or outside the box. And this is the biggest problem I find with education is we can always make excuses or understand why there should be some kind of universality as far as, you know, particular jobs or occupation. But when you're talking about public education, if you're going to try to bring anything into the equation other than academics, so math, science, you know, all those things that we were normally conducive in understanding, if you don't have somewhere like where I'm trying to get as morality or the understandings of human psychology or all these things, you have
critical thinking.
Yeah, you have to get that somewhere. And if it's going to come from one area, then the only way that that's going to be conducive for actual human knowledge is if you're allowed critical thinking skills. And once again, I noticed that both religious institutions in the past, and once again, I can say there's exceptions, there's caveats. So not everyone, not even when I went to public school, most of the teachers were just, you know, conformists, go along with the literature that they were told that they were meant to teach the students, but they never stepped outside of those boundaries. I did have a few teachers, but it was those few, that very tiny minority of teachers, probably 3 or 4 over the course of my entire education, that actually helped me to expand on my genuine knowledge. Now, the rest of them did their job as far as, you know, teaching me to, you know, math, right? Like as far as 2 + 2 is 4 and mathematics and all that entails, or English, learn how to read and write. But like I said, what I'm noticing today, and which is the big contrast in the past, is morality. Because churches have been removed from the equation as far as understanding morality, the education system now seems to be the dominant force or area where people are gaining their understanding as far as morality and ethics. Or when I was growing up, it seemed to be the television was the go-to source to gain your sense of morality or ethics. Once again, I'm very appreciative of the fact today that we no longer have to be stuck in those confines. This is the beautiful thing. For most of human history, we were stuck within the confines of whatever was afforded to us. You know, if you go back even prior to the Gutenberg press, you were limited in the knowledge, whatever the locals in your community or the elders, anyone that had a certain sense of knowledge or wisdom, that was what you were allowed or afforded to as far as your understanding or your concepts regarding the outer world, or the world that's much bigger than and expansive than what you're accustomed to in your little community. But like I say, today we actually live in the era, like I consider today, and I use this terminology all the time, I call it Gutenberg press on steroids, is we live in the age of information where you actually have access to the breadth and the history of almost all of human knowledge at your fingertips. So the fact that we today are still trying to function in our modern education system with those, I call them dinosaurs or archaic models of the past, which was, like I said, was fine, was conducive with the Industrial Revolution. But like I said, today we're trying to do what I've coined the phrase myself, the Enlightenment Era 2.0. And to do that, the only way you're going to be able to expand upon your knowledge is to step outside those bounds. And the public education system is definitely very much confining and containing of the human understand in regards to knowledge these days. Now, like I said, there are caveats, there are exceptions. There are some teachers that may try to teach you outside those bounds, but not enough to actually give you that kind of semblance of understanding and how important it is to think critically about the kind of, especially in the philosophical aspects of human understanding and human cooperation. Anyways, Mario, I want you to delve in there because, like I say, I don't want to get too much into the history. I just want to kind of elaborate a little bit to the people that there is a history to our education system. It was conducive to certain kind of understandings and knowledge in the past, but we have to deal with the world that we're living in today and understand the fact that we're no longer contained and confined to within that narrow scope or purview.
Yeah, and I completely 100% agree with you on the fact that I feel that we're all blessed in this day and age to be in the age of, you know, the internet, where we have the internet at our fingertips. We're able to communicate with people, gain knowledge, you know. And I hear there's a lot of people that, like especially with students, whether they're college, high school, I've been hearing a growing trend of people saying that, oh, university or college is useless, or high school is useless. You could just learn your stuff on your own accord and stuff like that. The thing is that's tricky. Because like the thing is, yeah, I mean, we can learn our information through, you know, our own research, internet and stuff like that. But at the same time, there is value in the system. And I feel that if we, you know, like you were saying, move away from the dinosaur version that we've had of the education system and kind of merge it together with the information age, I feel it will benefit students a lot more. And I feel that, yeah, I do feel that the teacher has a position with, I mean, obviously teaching the students, but I feel like there's a growing need for teachers to be facilitators where they kind of guide students through Socratic questioning as to how to develop their critical thinking, right? How to develop critical thinking and to build that in order for them to reach the answer that's correct, you know? Because in one of my prior videos, because I have a YouTube channel as well, and basically I was saying that when, like, a lot of people, like let's say in a arbitrary situation, a lot of people may not know the truth, but when they discover the truth, it's very loud in their minds, right? So I feel that as teachers, what we should do is facilitate that journey that students have into attaining the critical thinking skills that they need, you know, challenging them with math, challenging them with even just like even subjective things like, let's say, religion, or let's say, I don't know, social studies and whatnot. And the tricky thing is that, I mean, a lot of teachers have bias, and myself included. Like just to kind of give a background as to myself for the audience here, I'm an Ontario teacher. I recently got my certification a couple of years ago in about 3 years ago, actually, 2016, early 2016, and basically. I had a track of thought, but kind of slipped my mind. So basically, you
got your education degree.
Yeah, so I got my education degree, and I started teaching in 2016. Basically, there's different levels of teaching. Like there's supply teaching, where you go to different schools each day, and there's also something else called an LTO, which is basically a contract teacher, where you're not necessarily permanent, but like you're doing like a contract, let's say for a few months or to a year, or and stuff like that. But it's only contract, right? And then permanent teaching is like you're there to school, you're there for, you know, a long time until you decide to move schools or whatever. So I have had experience both as a supply teacher and as an LTO. I was talking about something earlier, but it just slipped my mind. Do you recall what I was referring to maybe a minute ago?
Just that you were leading up about the your official education as far as being a teacher, but no, I didn't really catch. You didn't.
Oh, no worries. So yeah. So basically, I feel that my goal as a teacher is to facilitate the growth of students through guiding them through their learning. And now, actually, I just remembered now. I was just saying that a lot of teachers do have, let's say, a bias toward things, including myself as a teacher. That's what I was going to earlier. But yeah, I have a bias as well. But the thing is, it's hard to be completely unbiased with everything. Like, yeah, that's the goal. Like, even if you look at journalism, for example, like a lot of news organizations, they promote the fact that they're non-biased, right? I mean, which is their goal. But in reality, a lot of them are very biased. I mean, take take CNN, for example, take Fox News, for example, right? CNN is known to be very left wing. Fox News is known to be very right wing. And I find that of all the media businesses, I feel that the Associated Press and Reuters are pretty decent at, reporting the news and stuff. So I get my news from them for the most part. But of course, I, try to keep an open mind. But the point I'm trying to get to is that it's hard to say that you're completely unbiased. Like even like as an individual, like myself, like I lean conservative, I lean libertarian, right? So I feel that it would be disingenuous for me to hide that from students, like especially if I'm teaching at the high school level. Like I'll tell them straight up, like if I'm going to be teaching about social studies or business, let's say for example, like I will say straight up, I have a conservative libertarian leaning bias, okay? But I'm letting you know that because your opinion matters just as much as mine. Because now we're talking about subjectivity now. This is subjectiveness. Like if it came to the context of math, that's more objective, right? So usually like you could do any which function you want in order to get to the final answer. But like with any subjective content, like let's say business or sociology or religion and stuff like that, I do let the students know, and I feel that this is what teachers should do. Not to say that they aren't, but I feel that it's very important for us to disclose the fact that, hey, you know what, your opinion matters just as much as mine. And my goal as a teacher is to try and have all my students discuss with each other and maybe kind of inject some questions to challenge them on what they're thinking about. Because I like you were saying about the media, is that a lot of people get their knowledge from the media, right? And then a lot of the times either they get it from the media and just take it at face value, or they take whatever they learn at school at face value, right? Which I mean, yes, we're here to teach them, but we're also here to kind of question things and think critically and stuff like that, right? So even if someone in my class, let's say, says something that lines up with my bias, I'm still going to try and push myself to question them on that and say, like I might give them like a left wing kind of view, or if someone's left wing, I'll try to give them a right wing kind of view, right, to kind of challenge them. But at the same time, if I interject my opinion, which, I will feel that itch, that urge to do that, that motivation, I will disclose it and be like, listen, this is my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. And even if I show, let's say, videos, like let's say a YouTube channel, like let's say, like there was one time I showed a video of Prager University, right? And I would disclose to the students, listen, Prager University is a right-wing leaning conservative video. What are your thoughts on it? And I had some students who agreed with it and some students who disagreed with it. And I made sure that they both spoke equally. And I think that's very, very important for teachers to do in order to refine that critical thinking skills of students. So yeah, that was just one thing I wanted to talk about. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, actually that perfectly segues into kind of, because my thing, I come from a history of my dad was big time into race, and my real dad, he's passed away long ago, but he was really big into race and competition. And that's kind of something that I carried with me, and I still am that way to this day. But I can't help but think, no matter what we're like, any subject or topic we're talking about, I can't help but think that every endeavor, and I mean, this is expandable and universal probably for most people. If you've ever bettered yourself in any way, form, or fashion, chances are it was because someone confronted you, or maybe a little bit superior in you some way, or at least someone challenged your preconceived notions, or in regards to racing, maybe just, I thought I could build an engine in this particular way, and it seemed to be okay, but someone else did a better job and they did something different. Well, that's the thing. It's having that kind of diversity and that pushback from other people. That competition is the only thing that I can actually think, when I think about it, it's the only thing that has ever expanded upon my knowledge. Anything that was, reductive to like some kind of lowest common denominator, right? Like, equality of outcome kind of things. That's actually that seeks to take the ones, that maybe have some kind of superior intellect or prowess in some way and reduce them. It's a reductive measure, whereas competition is always expansive. And like I say, you never gain or achieve any amount of success unless competition has been introduced at some point in time. And education is one of those things, like you're saying. So yes, just like you, I don't even identify left or right, because when you come about things from the philosophical aspect instead of politics is to seek, they use human psychology to divvy us up. It's an easy thing. It's sophistry. It's political. It's legally. That's what they do. But if you think about things from the philosophical sense, we have to understand there is a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. But just like you have emotion, like I have emotions, and like my heart. Well, it's not necessarily my heart, but you get it, my heart. And then I have my brain. To me, the biggest thing is always about not allowing one to dominate the other, but always allowing each other to benefit in a positive manner. So, like I say, I like for people that come from the left, they seem to be more predominantly disposed to caring about and being compassionate towards people they seem as being oppressed in some form. Well, just like if I was raised as a child, and I know myself, I was small before I had my heart operation when I was a teenager, and I was bullied. Now, if someone had told me to seek out, if my dad had told me to seek out safe spaces I don't think that would have actually helped me. But because he kind of taught me to confront a bully and to challenge them on their premise and maybe push back, it actually gave me a better psychology, gave me a healthier understanding of what it is to have some confidence, right? And it also allowed me to challenge other people in areas. And actually, a couple of the bullies turned out to be much better people as a result of that,
100%
of the pushback. So that's something, no matter if it's in education, in your social life, or in economics, yes, always having competing models is actually the only thing that's ever benefits. So just like you were saying, as far as if you have a bias, of course, I think we all pretty much have a bias. The key to it is just like, and now you have people like Jordan Peterson kind of expand upon that, where they're tying in religion, psychology, and everything, with the yin and yang, right? Where you're just always trying to find that middle ground, because once again, humans, we're all fallible. We all have emotions that can take over sometimes and kind of skew our views as far as if we're using our intellect. But once again, that's where you got to always push back. And like I say, in the education system, what I've noticed is the pushback isn't there. I even my two sons, my oldest son is the same age as you. He's 27. Just when he graduated in grade 12, just in that time frame, my younger son is 3.5 years younger than him. But just in that 3-year time frame, I watched where my oldest son, when he graduated, they already were starting to expand upon. Now, this is on the East Coast in New Brunswick too. So the education system is much more progressive in Ontario than it would be in New Brunswick. But I even noticed in a less progressive area like New Brunswick, where just in that 3-year time frame, it went from, there were probably 5 or 6 people, 7 people. They expanded it to probably 5, 6, 7 people that graduated that had with certain honors or acknowledgments. To just 3 years later, my youngest son, when he graduated, every single one in the classroom were brought up and given some kind form of recognition. Now, I get it, right? If you're just using that heart, sounds good. Let's tell everyone that they've done something exceptional. But once again, you're actually not even helping that person by giving them an award for something that they actually haven't done. You just basically engineered or created an award to give them the sense that they're not left behind, but you now disincentivize that person to a degree. Who knows? Every one of us, we're all individuals. So I don't know how much that affected the psychology of that particular individual or each particular individual, but you've definitely disincentivized the person to at least some degree from trying to strive for more success. Because once again, whether you're talking about in my racing career or anything, any endeavor, my construction, my truck driving job, anything I've ever undertaken, it's those times when someone have challenged me and shown me that there is some room for improvement and I do need to seek out to improve. That's the time that's actually benefited my psychology and made me understand myself better and allowed me and afforded me to be more compassionate to others around me, because then I understood the psychology and how important it was. Now I translated that into not just, like I say, not just education, but the way I raised my children as well, leading by example, making sure that they were rising to occasion. I didn't intervene to say, here, I'll help you. It's that same concept of, like you've even heard others probably discuss, as far as help. You can help people to a certain degree, but then you have to kind of let them, figure things out on their own, but at least give them the opportunity to do so, because that's that kind of socializing, whether it's in the education system or even just when you're hanging around with people, that kind of without the structure. And I get, we do need some structure for sure. There's got to be structure. So just like when I talk about education, no, not everybody should be sitting in their behind their computers, because not everyone's occasion if everyone's just sitting at home. So there's got to be, and I think that's something that would be conducive, because it helps socialize. But there has to be, like I say, there has to be competing models for education, because as we all understand, I know I did very early on when I was going to school, is most of the way that teachers were educating the people at that particular time was not conducive for me in particular. It was conducive for some people, but not necessarily for me. I've gained a lot of my knowledge just by, like I say, well, I went to the inner city of Toronto. So I had I gained some of the best sociological knowledge as far as how to interact and deal with other human beings, was just by that kind of social interaction that was unstructured, because it allows me to start to think of things on the fly and more critically without someone leading me all the time. Now, I get we do need some structure, not totally rejecting the structure, but my problem today is it's so structured that people are actually, I don't even think people are actually getting a genuine education anymore. To me, it brings me back to what I was kind of alluding to earlier. It seems more along the lines of indoctrination these days than an actual genuine education. Not saying that there aren't, like I say, there are certain teachers that are you're definitely going to get the academic aspects of it to a certain degree. But because of this kind of new way of thinking where there's no such thing as right or wrong as far as morality, and with bringing that into the education system, if we stuck to just plain academics, then I'd be totally fine. Math is math, science is science. And those are things that actually usually aren't very controversial, and most people are universally consistent, because you're not going to hear too many teachers suggest that 2 + 2 is 4.5, right?
Yeah.
So if you just stuck to the basics of academia, the core tenets of academia, then I don't think there would be any issue involved. But because we understand these days that academia education is very much conducive with teaching people about a certain sense of morality, and they're using now government, because that's where the education and that system entails, where it originates. Now instead of religious institution, and because people don't have an area where they go to these days, a lot less people, some people still go to church, but because now education seems to be, once again, the one size fits all. They're not just trying to teach you academia these days. What you're seeing today, especially with the social justice warriors or this cultural Marxism or postmodernism, they've turned it into basically a quasi-religious institution. And once again, I'm not even rejecting religious institutions, because I come from it myself. The problem is without having competition. So if you have, as people like Jordan Peterson has alluded to, like 90+% of the people, you're probably a small minority within representation of the education system of people that would even identify as libertarian or conservative. Now, if you had the ability for each student to get the kind of differences in knowledge and understanding in regards to history, philosophy, politics, all these things from people like yourself, especially when you get into the higher grades, then I would be fine, because once again, that'll allow allow the meritocracy to function properly. So the people that are properly educated, but because we don't have that anymore, now it's basically just, you get a diploma from government, right? And I know lots of people that have diplomas lying on their wall, and they're, to me, and I don't mean it to be just a blatant insult, but I kind of liken these people to well-trained seals at the zoo. And let me tell you, or at the marine land. Now, let me tell you, those seals are amazing at regurgitating and repeating, right? Or replicating what they've been told. But they once you step that seal outside the bounds of whatever they've been told to bounce that ball in their head, these people don't know how to function outside of that, or these animals, or just like people today in the education system. People seem stuck. They seem like, to me, it's weird, because like I say, with that, if I didn't have the religious background, I might not be able to correlate it so closely. But because I see how much they're so closely aligned as far as people come out of the education system that are indoctrinated into, like I say, postmodernism, culture Marxism, or whatever kind of ideology that's put forth and presented by a lot of these teachers, to me, they're coming out the same on the other side of that education, the same as the people that come out of like religious institutions. They're very knowledgeable on particular fields and particular subjects that, that was jammed into their head. But of course, but they lack the capacity or the skills to even allow something to enter into their cranium that's not something that's conducive or aligned with the knowledge they're the preconceived notions that's been jammed in their heads. And when people reject knowledge just by sheer fact that it doesn't align with their preconceived notions or their ideology, well, that's a failure. Like I say, no matter if it comes from religious institutions or the education
I completely agree.
system, every one of those people tremendously.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. By the way,
sorry, man, you kind of cut out there, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I guess there's maybe some technical issues on my side. I apologize. But please let me know if, let's say, I'm getting the video's getting jittery or whatnot. But yeah, no, I completely 100% agree with what you're saying. I personally feel that whether it's teachers or the education system, they're very, very ambitious. They're very much idealists. I'm an idealist as well in a lot of regards. And I feel that in coinciding with what you were saying, basically the thing that I learned from when I was doing teachers college education is I learned that students remember their teachers not by what they taught them, but how they made them feel, which is very, very interesting. You know, like when you remember your favorite teacher, you remember them for how they made you feel as opposed to, oh, they taught me the Pythagorean theorem. Well, yeah, the Pythagorean theorem is helpful with learning critical thinking and process with math, but it's how the teacher made you feel. Did they make you feel like you're important in this world, that you're, that you matter? You know, I think that's very important. So I feel that that's where a lot of the social justice kind of movements are born from the education system, because it's all young people. They're very malleable. And a lot of these people in the education system, myself included, have a lot of motivation to help see changes in this world. You know, like I remember going to see a guest speaker at the school board that I'm at right now, who's of Indigenous descent. And he basically was, he gave his speech on his perspective on how to improve relations with Indigenous people. And basically, he was saying that to us teachers, you're all in the best position to shape this world for the better. And that's why I ask you all to, do the best you can to help this world and help our community, not just the Indigenous people, but Canada as a whole. You know, so that's where I feel a lot of that, movement is born. You know, and I think it has a lot of good intention. A lot of these people, a lot of teachers like myself, and a lot of people in the education system have good intentions, very, very good intentions, right? But where I kind of come in as a conservative, as a libertarian, is what's the best way to attain that? How do we promote social justice in a way that's healthy and not toxic, like, the cultural, like what's happening with cultural Marxists, as someone like Jordan Peterson's pointing out, right? So yeah, I feel like that's where kind of the social justice movement is kind of born from that, right? And I feel that in order to avoid, this is just my opinion, but in order to avoid this whole like cookie cutter, square box thinking with regards to, social justice and sociology or politics or philosophy or whatnot, it's to really engage them in critical thinking. And I know that's very, very tricky. And I feel like, because we all have emotion, like you said, you have emotion, I have emotion, like we're all human beings. Like I feel like there's a lot of people who think that, I'm a logical person, I don't think with emotion, I think with logic. No. I honestly feel that every human being thinks with emotion. Okay, it's just we kind of tap into whatever logic kind of lines up with our thinking. But it's more of a challenge to think along the lines of logic, to think factually. And to analyze, details. Like, for example, I'll give you one example of why teachers are pushed to be factual with how they go about their teaching. Like, let's say, for example, there's a student in my class, hypothetically, let's say there's a student in my class who's has behavioral issues, let's say, right? If I wanted to, I could potentially go into, maybe they have autism, maybe they have ADD, and stuff like that. But it would not be good as a teacher for me to tell their parent, hey, I think your kid has ADHD, or hey, I think your kid has autism. A lot of them will get upset by that. Okay. So instead, what teachers are supposed to do is not kind of to throw in their opinion of how the child is. Instead, we're supposed to just lay out the facts, like, okay, your child threw a water bottle across the class at this time today, or your child took someone else's work and ripped it up, like, only list facts. And then it's the parent who has to kind of figure out what that means regarding their kid. Right. So that's just one example. So to extrapolate that toward other areas of not even just the education system, but the world in general, I feel that as educators, we need to really pay a lot more attention to specifically just the facts without throwing in our opinions, and have the students figure out what their opinion is regarding all these facts that have been listed out, and facilitate a conversation. Let's hear this opinion from the student. Let's hear that opinion from the student. Okay, now we're starting to see a merger of the two sides, or three sides or four sides, whatever, end level sides of the classroom. Hear all the different opinions. So how does this make you feel? And then ask questions regarding those opinions, and kind of challenge them more. And then eventually I feel that we will inch closer and closer to the truth. And that's the thing with, like, subjectivity and objectivity. Objectivity, like it's I feel it's near impossible for a human person to objectively find the objective truth. because we're all limited by our subjectivity, our perception, right? So the best we can do is try to bring our subjective perception as close to the truth as possible, right? And I feel we can only do that through engaging in critical thinking. That's why, like, you know, yeah, with math we could say 2 + 2 = 4, but again, 2 + 2 = 4, only assuming the not confines, but like the limitations and boundaries of the reality in which we live in today, you know. So like we're building based on our observations and our facts and stuff like that, and we need to have like those competing opinions be thrown against each other in order to refine us and bring us as close to the truth as possible, as you were saying earlier, you know. So I am 100% on board with you that competition is extremely important. If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of extrapolate that part of the conversation into sort of like another related part of the conversation of school choice, you know, because like the thing is, I feel that students and parents are confined to only choosing the school that's within their postal area, their postal code, you know. It's not like when let's say in industry, for example, like you have a lot of different cars to choose from because they all might offer different things. Like I'll even take the video game industry, for example, because when I did my undergraduate degree for university, I did it in game development and entrepreneurship. So I'll kind of use this as an example since I'm a little more familiar with it. With video games, for example, you have it's an oligopoly. You have PlayStation by Sony, you have Xbox by Microsoft, and Nintendo with their consoles. They usually change their names with that. And I remember back in 2001, like that era there, the main competitors were the PlayStation 2, the Xbox original, and the GameCube, right? And the thing is, Nintendo has always been like this industry leader in the 80s and the 90s, especially when they competed with Sega. But Nintendo would just be on top. But then Nintendo started to fall through the floor when Sony came in with the PlayStation. They were more successful, right? So the thing is, Nintendo came out with the GameCube. It was kind of in line with, you know, common video gaming and stuff like that. They were trying to compete against Microsoft and Sony, and they were just losing, right? So they had to kind of sit back and be like, okay, there's a problem here. What can we do to differentiate ourselves from the competition? So then they came out with the Wii. Right, and the Wii was very different from their competition. They, instead of focusing on like best graphics, best technical prowess or whatever, instead they focused on, okay, what do people find fun? How do we shift it where the design is more appealing to, let's say, a wider market or whatever, right? So when they came up with the motion controls and also how the games were designed around that, a lot of people found that very welcoming. You had like grandparents playing with their grandkids and stuff like that. Like it was very inclusive, and Nintendo was like very different from the competition now. Before it was like comparing apples to apples. Now it's comparing apples to oranges, right? So people had choice. Do I go with, you know, something that's more gaming heavy like Microsoft and Sony, or do I go with something that's more open, kind of like a party family environment or whatever, right? So they had choice, and some people went with both. Some people went with one of them, right? I mean, now we've skipped a lot more ahead. Now we have like newer consoles, like let's say the Nintendo Switch, which is like, you know, console gaming on the go, and the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. But the point is that people had choice with what they wanted for themselves, what they felt was appropriate to their lifestyle, right? But we don't have that in the education system. You're just like shoved in there, like you only have this choice because it's controlled, you know, it's controlled by this, you know, basically the way the government structure is today. So I feel that one way to combat this is to have schools, rather than have schools operated under the government, I feel that schools should be operated under entrepreneurs, you know? And the thing is, I feel that, like, even with, let's say, the game industry, I still feel like the game industry is limited because there's only 3 contenders, you know? It's an oligopoly. And as someone that's, you know, conservative leaning, that's pro-capitalist, I feel that oligopolies are not the most ideal situation for the economy, you know? Like, I feel like the more competition you have, the better. So even the game industry can improve on that. But government is like a monopoly. Like that's even like less appealing than an oligopoly, right? So I feel that if we left it up to the people to craft their own schools, and let's say, you know, my idea, personally, my understanding, my belief is that maybe if we had it where that people, like citizens, can choose to make their own schools, like kind of like people might say, yeah, that sounds like private education, but what my idea is different. The way it's different from that is that basically the way I see it is that we have our driving school. Like let's say driving school, for example, right? There's many different driving schools. Okay, there's different types of driving schools by different people or whatever. But what they do is they train the students to improve their driving skills so that when they go for the test, they'll be able to pass that standardized test, right? Now, I know like in Ontario, we have EQAO where basically students are trained by, the school system, by teachers in order to accomplish the EQAO, and just so that way the government can see how students are progressing, right? And as of right now, as far as I know in Ontario, math scores are going down, like students are doing worse, right? So the thing is that the way I see it is that if, let's say, schools, like individual schools themselves were managed by, let's say, by the citizen or by the entrepreneur or whatever, parents will have more choice as to what school they send their kids, and the testing, the evaluation could still be, I feel, could still be done by a centralized, let's say, institution, whether it's managed by the government or whatnot, and then we could see the competition between the schools. Which school can train the students as best as possible in order to attain the government standards of education, so that way they'll do well at math. So now parents have choice. They're like, okay, I have a choice of 5 different schools. This school has really high math scores, and this school has the worst math scores. So I'm going to send my kid to this school here who has the best math scores, right? So now parents have choice as opposed to being confined to just their postal area. Now they have, choice to send their kid, and basically they'll get the best education because of competition. That's what we need, is competition. That's my perspective on that. So yeah, I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, when you're talking about the actual, like the final end product, like once you stepped outside the education system, the thing that should matter most is, because obviously we care about merit, right? I mean, well,
yes,
we do. A lot of people maybe not, but even those that maybe advocate against it, trust me, they believe in merit as well. But at the end of the day, what you're really talking about is accreditation. Once again, I use my history and my background knowledge on racing, and I think you go to the local drag strip, and there could be 7, 8 different manufacturers, because nowadays they race some of the smaller, like the Japanese imports and stuff. In the old days, you would have been stuck with just 3, predominantly domestic. So General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford. But because there's expansive, and now you have Japanese imports, you have Korean imports, and all kinds, and German import. You have all kinds of different areas now but all these people that are tuning these cars at the end of the day to race down the quarter of a mile, they come from so many different areas, so many different backgrounds. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach. It's all trial by error and experimentation. But at the end of the day, it's that final product, right? That to me, that's the genuine accreditation that we should be concerned about, is what is the representation of the final product, not how you necessarily got there. I don't care which path you took to get your education or attain your education. It's what is the end product? What am I seeing at the end? And once again, as long as we have some kind of baseline analysis, is how we can measure people's competence. And that's not that difficult, right? Especially when you're talking about particular fields. And that's easy, like doctors, lawyers. If you understand like the language of legal language, is if you're a lawyer or if you're a doctor, if you understand all the instruments that you need to perform, well, depending on the kind of doctor, if you're a surgeon. But like I said, at the end of the day, you're just talking about accreditation. So yes, in this modern era that we have so much at our disposal, I think myself, I'm only 48. Well, I mean, it's older compared to you. But when I think that's not even really that old. But when I think about it, when I was going through school, I had none of this. It wasn't until the mid 80s, and I had a VIC 20, Commodore VIC 20. That was my first computer. But it wasn't until the 80s that we even had this concept that you can get knowledge outside of your historical education institute. I think even growing up, I come from a fairly poor family, and even just to have an encyclopedia, you go to friends' houses, their parents have the entire encyclopedia. It's like, ooh, back then that was a couple thousand. My parents couldn't afford that. So you were greatly limited in your knowledge. Like I say, today, not only can I have access to the encyclopedia, I can have access, and everyone, just by the sheer connectivity of the internet, and it's pretty cheap. So you have literally access, like I was saying earlier, to the breadth of human knowledge, or at least most of it. There's still, it's every day it's being, I mean, the internet's getting bigger every day, from like people uploading, taking old amazing books and literature, scanning them page by page, putting them in PDF. People, I think what it is because we're functioning in it today. It's like when you're mired in it in the day, like it doesn't seem, it's just, hey, it's just the way things are. Someone in the future, 100 years that come back to this day, they'd be like, Do you fuckers realize how much you had? I don't think we truly, most people don't even truly grasp what the internet age, the information age has truly afforded us, and every single one of us. And the thing when you were talking about and alluding to back to the topic of competition is, even for like, if you're one of these people that are one of the far leftists or all about equality of outcome is, think about just even, I don't even understand why these people come from the mentality or that kind of, or they're such opponents to the competition, because even when I think back down to the lowly of the lowest, like the people that, let's say if you had a class with 30 students, the two least intelligent of those students, 29 and 30, they're still not exactly on the same level. And they still can compete with each other. And by sheer fact that they're competing with each other in some way, that entices the other person to strive for success as well. So once again, even if you're someone, like, that's what I find weird about the leftists is like, you constantly think that everyone's got to be the only way you're going to get at the top that you seek to attain. Like, if you want to get this kind of equality, well, it's doing those steps that you need to climb up that ladder. And that's the only way that's going to happen is by, like you were suggesting, is having that competition, whether it's, information from people from the left or the right or anywhere in between, just expanding upon your knowledge and hearing information from all different kinds of people will allow you, like I say, you don't even have to worry about the people at the upper echelons, that top 1%, even the very lowliest person at that lowly 99 percentile or whatever, down at the very, very bottom or whatever. You're still talking about where competition will do those people just as much good as it would for the people at the top. So to me, I don't understand when anyone rejects the concept of competing with each other, especially when you're percents. It's not a better, you're not going to fist the cops.
Sorry, it seems like you're cutting out. Hello?
I don't think.
Sorry. Hello?
Ever actually. That might be different areas, venues, or whatever, but they would every single one of them, if you sat down and talked to them. Sorry, go ahead, Mario.
Sorry, no, I apologize. My
still there? Oh yeah, I see. I cut out there for some reason. Hello?
Okay. Yeah. Hi there. Can you hear me?
I'm still here.
Perfect. Yeah, it seems like the internet's kind of cutting out a bit. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I apologize. I think it got cut out for the last 30 seconds. I guess the internet feed's a little bit funny now, but sorry, you were saying earlier?
Oh yeah, I see that too. Actually, you know what we should do when I'm talking? Well, you don't have to worry about it, but I'm going to test with actually. When you're talking, I'll cut off my side of the actual video, the camera. So maybe it's because using less bandwidth or something. But yeah, because it does seem to mess up from time to time for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, like I was saying, it comes down to competition, and I don't understand why anyone would try to reject, try to compete in some area, in some regard. And like you were saying, when you're talking about that, it's not like the old days where you had to go out and create. Like, we don't even have to reinvent the wheel anymore. Like I say, the information is already readily available. People like even Jordan Peterson have talked about it. Now, even Jordan Peterson, as much as he's the guy that everyone's paying attention to these days, but years ago, I remember Khan Academy. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, KHAN, but they even started an initiative where they were trying to create some kind of online tutorial university or some kind of way to educate people in the online sphere. And like I say, to me, that's great, because at the end of the day, I don't care where you've gained your education, like what institution, or if you went online, if you went to some actual social environment where you're a whole lot of people, or some people that choose to do it through like just the internet and they want to socialize maybe in their own private realm, because that's the other thing. We can socialize. I mean, education, people always say, well, you need that for the socialization. And just to a small degree, I can kind of understand and agree with that. But then I think back when I was going to school, the only socializing that you're actually allowed to do, and I'm sure that's probably that way today, although you can correct me if I'm wrong, is recess. It's not like you're sitting there allowed to talk to the guy that's sitting beside you in class. So you're not really doing a whole lot of socializing. So as long as people are socializing, that once again, that's something I think is very important. But yes, you should be afforded and allowed lots of different opportunities to get your education. And then at the end of the day, if you're going to be hired by some employer for whatever particular occupation that you undertake or you want to enter into, as long as there's some way for them to test, your competence level, then that to me, it's the accreditation. It's the fact if you come from an institution that just like, and people say, oh, you need government for it. No, matter of fact, you just need word of mouth. Just like I talk to people all the time today, and they say you need like this kind of central plan model or kind of top down type of system to have it structured and prevent bad things from happening. But I always like using a reference source. Well, eBay was easy, but now my wife's into this new thing with garage sale where you can go and buy from people and basically just show up. They want to sell you like a small item, let's say for $50. You go, you put the $50 in the mailbox, you take the item. It's all trust based. Fact of the matter is, even though there's no structure, that trust happens naturally because you can screw that first person over, right? That you can get that product, that purse or that whatever, that wallet, and you can take that and not leave that money, and you can screw that first person over. But because we live in the age of connectivity, you're not going to get away with it, because that's going to be a check mark against you. Just like if you're selling something on eBay, you have so many options today that the accreditation is almost built in the fact that just like the Better Business Bureau. When I was younger, it was a big thing, the Better Business Bureau. There's all kinds of examples where you can find a way where people can be accredited or given some level or measure of their competence without a top-down structure. It's just a simple matter. Can you reproduce? Can you take a test and show that you have the competence level? Or a lot of times depend on the occupation too, because that will work for certain particular occupations. But then there are other occupations where you may have to actually go into it. Like construction is another perfect example, where actually a formal education, I've seen people that have gotten formal education and taken shop in school or something, but a lot of the times you end up in that particular field, and the guys that actually do those jobs will kind of laugh at you, because most of the times the teacher that are teaching you in school have probably not even, they've learned from a book, so they don't understand how to function on the fly, think critically, or problem solve, because that's the biggest problem when you're talking about endeavors where you're talking about in the real world. So this is a big thing with a lot of parts of the education, is hands-on training by competent people in a particular field. So I don't know, like maybe you might not want to expand that. Actually, you might even get to the point where you could expand that to doctors or lawyers or whatever. But either way, if you're trained by competent people that are actually in the field rather than necessarily an educator in an institution, a lot of times you'll see that the people that were trained in the actual field, the particular field that they're going into, is they're going to learn a whole lot more, because you're actually dealing with actual real world fundamentals and not just hypotheses or scenarios that you can construct in the classroom.
Right. I feel you. Yeah, no, I completely 100% agree with you on that. And I just want to actually elaborate on a couple of things that you said. By the way, I completely agree with you on the accreditation thing, where like that's really where I was alluding to, is the fact that like to kind of touch upon that. Apparently, the University of Waterloo, I think it's come out maybe a couple months ago. Apparently, they kind of give a grade to certain high schools with regards to what students they want to accept into their university. Because the thing is, there's no benchmark for accreditation with regards to, let's say, individual schools. Like there might be one school that like really hammers their students hard with like challenges and like tries to really like push them and challenge them with regards to, let's say, learning physics or learning calculus and stuff like that, right? But another school might be a little more lenient with those subjects, right? So getting an 80% at the tougher school will be more valuable than the 95% you get in an easier school, right? So universities like the Waterloo, which again, I feel that Waterloo is not the only one that does this. I'm pretty sure all universities and colleges do this, where they basically kind of take a look and like they say, okay, which schools tend to be easier for students, which schools tend to be more difficult, and that's how they kind of value. Okay, it would be disingenuous to value a 90% at a tougher school with a 90% at an easier school, right? But the awful part of that is the fact that again, parents are forced to basically send their child to a school that's close to them, and that's it. They only have like one choice, one or two choices. That's it, right? So they don't really have any choice. If their local school is one of those easier schools, that student is basically stuck at that school, and they're not going to be going to a school that their parents would find as better for their child. So that's why I think competition is so important, because parents will be able to choose, okay, which school is going to train my child to be the most competent at what they do, so that way they get into the best university or college, which will train them further into the career that they want. So accreditation is such a huge thing that's just, it's not stable right now, unfortunately, right? And I feel that having competition will kind of eliminate that issue, where now parents know, okay, which school is good for what I want for my child, or even the students themselves, if they're of age. Let's say they're in high school, they're not completely dependent. At least they shouldn't be. That's another challenge I feel. Not even just parents or teachers have, but the community, to try and bring children up to be competent people as early as possible. But they'll be able to choose what school is most appropriate for them. So yeah, accreditation is huge. And the other thing I want to talk about is, I know you made a comment earlier about the not being able to talk in class. The only time you could talk is during recess. I feel that it depends. It really, really depends, because it depends, I feel, on the teacher, but at the same time, it also depends on the circumstances of the classroom. Like, I'll take myself as an example. I absolutely do not want any students talking when I'm delivering a lesson. Like, that's like the way my brain works is that if I hear like the littlest distraction, the littlest noise, I'm completely thrown off. My lesson ends up sucking, and then my students suffer in the end, right? So that's why I say, okay, everyone, we need to stay quiet in the classroom, so that way I'm able to teach for you. It's for you all to learn. I'm not doing this for myself. It's not to do with my pride, okay? It's to do with your success, okay? So I make that very clear. But the moment I'm done my lesson, okay, then the students can talk with each other. I won't care if they're working on stuff, let's say they're working on homework and they have side conversations with their friends or the classmates, whatever. I'm completely fine with that. I have no issue with that whatsoever. In fact, I think that's conducive to their learning, for them to be able to talk with each other in the classroom, and to do activities. Like, if I give them an activity to do in the classroom, yeah, talk away. I'm totally cool with it. But if I'm on in front of them delivering a lesson, that's when they need to be quiet, because then I can't teach the lesson after, and then they're not going to learn, right? So it's kind of tricky with that. But if I were to say, okay, no students can talk at all in my class, whether you're doing an activity or not, I feel that would not be the most conducive to their learning, I feel. So I feel that there is a time and a place where students are able to talk in the pursuit of their learning, but it just depends on what's going on in the classroom. And even that's still tricky, because you have some students that maybe are not the type to think or conduct themselves along the lines of, like, everyone sit down in their chair and whatnot. Because like it's tricky, because there's some students that have, like, let's say ADD or ADHD or autism or Asperger's, where a system where they have to sit in their seat and not talk and sit still might be very difficult for them. It's because, like, let's say, for example, someone with let's say, for example, someone with ADHD might find it very difficult to sit in their seat. So to force everyone to sit in their seat may not be the most conducive for their learning. So a way to go around that is to maybe have an activity where students are able to move around. Like, let's say, for example, let's say with regards to math, they have to let's say learn a new concept with regards to math, okay? And let's say I were to assign different groups of students. Let's say there's 4 groups in the classroom. One group focuses on, this is just a hypothetical example. Let's say one side of the class is focusing on algebra, the other side is focusing on geometry, and the other side is focusing on something else. I don't know, just a hypothetical example, okay? And let's say those groups are in 4 corners of the classroom, okay? They write their work down, they research and stuff like that, and then when they're done, they move to the other side of the classroom where they discuss and they try to figure things out with that topic, or let's say you could have another system where, this might sound confusing verbally, but like, if I were to show an example, maybe it'd make more sense, where basically, maybe if I start this from the ground up again, let's say you have 4 expert groups, okay? Each expert group is supposed to learn a specific topic, right? So they go to their expert groups, they learn about the topic, and then they come back to their home group, and then they deliver what they learned to the rest of their group, and then each member of their group deliver what they learned from the other students. So in other words, what I'm saying is that there are different ways to have students learn in a way where that they don't always have to sit down in one spot, okay? Another scenario is maybe they can learn, like, let's say on a field trip, it doesn't have to necessarily be inside a classroom, because again, like, there's a diverse range of situations for each student. Like, every student is different, but at the same time, I feel that we really, really need to consider this and think of this is that every student matters. Okay, like myself, when I was a student, I struggled a lot as a student, especially in elementary school, and I often felt like the lost sheep because like I felt like I just didn't fit into the whole classroom dynamic. I kept moving around and stuff like that. I couldn't sit still, and like the teachers, it would drive them crazy, and I don't blame them. But at the same time, it's just that I felt like because I was a challenging student, like I felt like I was kind of ostracized by peers or even other teachers, not all, but like some, let's say, right? Because I was a difficult child, But I mean, the thing is that I felt like when I was a student, like I wasn't really going anywhere in life, But thankfully, when I went to high school, things got better for some reason. I felt like I got more accommodations with what I needed. Like I'll disclose this now. Like I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is under the autism spectrum, back when I was 9 years old, and I received accommodations here and there and whatnot. But things ended up getting better, thankfully, and I felt I was able to succeed. I started off with the high school system. I started off as applied, which is kind of like the general stream, which leads to college. And then there's academic, which is the university stream that leads to university. I started off with applied, but then I ended up altering it to academic and then eventually go to university, and I ended up becoming a teacher, and I ended up finding success. And like this came a long way from when I was a student. Like when I was a student, like I genuinely thought I was a stupid person. Like I genuinely thought I was stupid, but the thing is that I just thought differently. Like I'll give you an example. I remember when I was in grade 4, I remember quite vividly the situation where we're learning about the medieval times. Okay. Medieval times was also known as the Middle Ages. Okay. And I said in the classroom out loud, I said, aren't we in the Middle Ages? Everyone burst out laughing. Oh my gosh, Mario's so stupid. How could he think that we're in the Middle Ages? And then they all start talking like from the people of the Middle Ages. But like, that's not what I meant. What I meant was I was talking from a semantic point of view. I was saying, why do we call that the Middle Ages when we're in the present? Because I always thought as the future as, out there, the past is behind us. So aren't we in the middle of the past and the future? That's what I thought. I'm thinking, okay, between the future and the past, we're in the middle. Like we're in the middle of that, the present. So why can't we call the present day the Middle Ages, right? I was talking semantically, but people at the time, I guess, didn't really care to understand what I actually meant, right? So I felt like maybe that's one scenario of why I felt ostracized. I mean, other scenarios was the fact of, let's say, behavioral issues. Maybe in some cases I wasn't given the support I needed, but there's other times where I was given the support that I needed, but it was the system itself that didn't jive with me. I don't know. It's very tricky. But the point I'm trying to get to is the fact that if I was able to find success despite being the least desirable student. I was once the least desirable student, and now I've become a teacher myself, and now I'm able to help students myself and kind of help them to become the best success they can be. If someone who was least desirable as a student can find success and help the world, that means I matter. That means I've mattered from the beginning. That means I've mattered even when I was the least desired student, right? So that is all. I feel that also is true with today's students who are, let's say, challenging, let's say, right? Because like if a challenging student like myself can now do great things today, I have the capacity to do that. That means other challenging students can do the same thing, and that they matter. And it's not even a matter of competency. It's not even a matter of what you do for the world. It's also what you are innately as human, the human spirit. Like I feel the human value comes from the fact that you exist. That's my perspective as a Catholic, as a Catholic Christian, is the fact that every human is valuable, just by the fact of being human. So if I matter, that means all my other students matter. And it's all about the parable of the lost sheep. Let's say a shepherd has 100 sheep and one goes missing. Is the shepherd going to be like, at least I have 99, one's missing or whatever? Or is that shepherd going to go out of his way to focus on that one sheep that got lost? Because the other 99 are doing pretty well, okay? So he's going to leave them a little bit. He's going to leave them a little bit and focus more on the sheep that's lost and help them find their way toward their success, and I feel that that's absolutely necessary and integral for teachers to follow. Now, in no way am I a perfect teacher. There's some times where I've had to send students outside, which hurt me because I went through that myself as a student. And like whenever I'd act up or not listen or whatever, I'd be sent outside. I'd be ostracized. It was awful. It was an awful, awful feeling. And I never want to do that for my students. But sometimes I ended up having to resort to that because of, just circumstances and, let's say, my own emotional limitations, and that's where I pause and I reflect, okay, how can I improve myself as a teacher so that way, I won't have to send students outside. I won't have to tell students to stay quiet, because I don't want to have to tell students to stay quiet. I want it where that the classroom is engaging, where they want to learn, and that they choose to be quiet out of their own choice, and I feel that's the goal. So this all comes down to me. How do I improve myself as a teacher to make it engaging for my students, where they want to learn and they want to have respect for me? I have to earn that from them. I feel, and I know it's a two-way street, but that's something that really speaks close to me as a former challenging student. And again, I'm not perfect, but I'm still learning as a teacher. Am I still good with the connection, or?
Yeah, I'm coming on there now. I was just letting you finish your thought there, but actually, you know what? That's perfect, because that just completely exemplifies, and it should be a big glaring sign for anyone that's paying attention, is this is the problem with having a one-size-fits-all approach. I've listened to Mario say this, and it actually hit home with me, because yes, I was not conducive for the typical kind of very structured authoritarian way of being educated. I've actually educated myself. Mostly, a lot of the education I have today is by me doing it for myself, by seeking out areas, venues, anywhere I can to fill my head with some kind of knowledge in some way, and having a lot of people that, because I have that competitive spirit, I want other people to challenge me, because I want to, I don't like being wrong. I am wrong periodically. I'm fallible human like everyone else, but I want people to challenge me. And if I just surround myself in an echo chamber, or was conducive to a one-size-fits-all approach, that's not going to be conducive to actually increasing my knowledge. So the problem, actually, Mario, it wasn't you, man. It wasn't you. I've heard that from myself, even my own sons, but it's not you. What it is because they function in that kind of a structured environment. I forget exactly who to quote specifically, so I'll just kind of paraphrase, but there's an old expression that kind of goes, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's not going to work out. Right? So,
yeah, he's going to think he's stupid.
Certain people, and because of biology or the environment or certain particular, and there is biology and evolution involved with certain people, even just the physical prowess, you can tell there's some people who are much more conducive with doing heavy lifting than others, right? So, and biology and your environment and lots of things actually affect and contribute to that. But this is why having a one-size-fits-all approach, it's not even, a lot of the kids, listen, my youngest son, my wife told me, I was so surprised. I was a truck driver at the time, so I didn't have as much of an active role in his education as far as like going for parent-teacher interviews, because I was on the road driving truck, gone for weeks at a time. The wife was the one, but they even tried to tell, like, my youngest son that they didn't know, but they said he might have ADD. What it is was he was bored as shit. They weren't challenging him, and I know it because the kid's a smart kid, right? He's just no one was challenging. Well, there was one teacher, I guess, but most of the teachers weren't challenging him. He was, like you say, taught to basically sit, be like. It was more regimented and too top down. And once, like I say, people just, no matter what example you want to use, people, it's not very expansive for their brain activity to feel that they're confined or trapped in any way. And a lot of people that are actually diagnosed with some of these ADD or ADHD a lot of them, it's just something that, psychologists or sociologists or people have invented to say that people that are not conducive with that particular kind of economic modeling, well, they have something wrong with them. It's not. There's not a goddamn thing wrong with them other than the fact that they don't fit in that nice little box that you painted, right? So that's all it is. I don't think people like you are, matter of fact, in the modern age, because of the things that I understand today, it's, if you tell me that you're someone that was one of those rare exceptions in school that the teachers were pointing to, now I could be incorrect in my assumption, but I'll make a wager any day that chances are it's probably because, yes, you weren't conducive with that kind of, dumbing down of just like race to the lowest common denominator, not allowing anyone to think critically about issues. Only just, like I say, all they really want you to do is repeat and regurgitate what you've been told. Well, you can get that in any kind of cult or religious institution. So they're not exceptional in any way, because they think that they've, if you come out of grade 1 and everyone passed at, 90, 100, what have they actually learned? When you set up the parameters that it's so structured that the only thing that you can measure their intelligence is if they repeated or regurgitate what they were told. That like, to me, and the crazy part is, it's insane that in 2019 we have to even explain this. Most of the times when I grew up, even a lot of people that you would call backwards people understood that that's not how you measure intelligence, for fuck's sake. I don't even know how we've got to that point, other than the fact, like I say, because religion, and I can't help but coming back to the fact, because everyone likes this one size fits. It's like, no, some things, listen, economics is economics, but education should be completely an area of human activity different. So we shouldn't be just looking at how can we streamline the process, right? How can we pump out enough people that are conducive with the preconceived notions that we jammed in their head? That's, that's okay for a factory. That's okay for like industrials. But like I say, if we're living in the modern information age and you want people to think critically, then the only way that that's going to function or be conducive for human knowledge is to allow them to do things in their own way. I mean, I love using the example that, and because to me, it paints a picture for most people that would understand, because at least most people understand who Galileo was. But could you imagine being someone like Galileo and saying, hey, by the way, everybody else in the world, literally, by the way, everybody else in the world that's been telling me I'm an idiot, right? Oh, by the way, yeah, the Earth isn't the center of the universe. I've been doing these observations with my little telescope. And hey, by the way, it turns out, from my perception, from my understanding, which I didn't get from anyone else, right, is it looks like actually that we're not the center of the universe. Matter of fact, kind of looks like we're rotating around this big thing we call the sun, which is, and you know what? It turned out hundreds of years later that one guy was right. So why would anyone think, like, and most examples of human knowledge or development or advancements in human knowledge or intellect has come from a single individual that has advanced us in some way because they were willing to think outside the box. So to me, the part that I find so confusing and confounding is, why would you even want to create an atmosphere, especially in the information age, where you still have a one-size-fits-all approach? Like to me, another example I use is yeah, let me go get the ox and buggy to travel into town. Meanwhile, there's a dude with a Lamborghini over here. What? No, I'm not going to jump on the ox or get in the buggy when there's a Lamborghini. And like I say, we live in the information age. Why would we ever think that we need a one-size-fits-all approach? And actually, back to what you're talking about, the socializing. Like I say, I understand what you're saying. I'm totally cool with all that. All I was kind of saying about the socializing is we actually have areas. It's not that we need the education system per se for that socializing. I mean, we could get it in lots of people that, after school activities, sports, mixed martial. There's a million ways for men and women to socialize with each other. Now, I acknowledge that in this modern information age, that is something that's not as prevalent as it used to be, because everyone seems to be wanting to use our technologies. So you're not socializing quite as much. Well, as far as like tangible face-to-face kind of contact, but you can still and this is why when I do these kind of conversations, I get people all the time that'll want to comment or argue in like a comment on Facebook, or I don't want to deal with people in just a comment. I've noticed so many times where the nuance, because you can't see people's facial expressions, you can't see their emotions, you can't see and there's no way to clarify things in real time and correct them. I mean, I've seen so many times where humans we're not adept yet. Hopefully, we never get to the point where we're completely adept to just dealing with each other without any personal, what makes us humans, right? Like I say, the physical expressions, our emotions, all those things that make us humans. The minute we try to, and like I say, you can see how easy it doesn't work, because people can misconstrue and argue over things, and you could spend hours on end arguing over someone, and it's just because you didn't understand the original concept.
Oh, yeah.
But if you talk to them in person, or like what we're doing today, where we're maybe not standing physically in front of each other, but it's a close replication, at least, because like I said, we have the audio, we have the visual, we have everything, at least, except the fact, and I'm saying not like we're touching each other anyways, but at least it's conducive for what humans are understanding, how we kind of communicate with each other. And this is the part that I think is desperately needed today, because a lot of these conversations or debate I see are so counterproductive and actually deconstructive, because they actually destroy all the credibility of the people, because then someone could just put an argument or a counter rebuttal out there that says, you're just an idiot. And then they start, no, talk to people. The socializing is something that's important. But once again, we don't need a necessary top-down education system for that. We just need to find many different areas where we can get together and learn how to not just deal with each other socially, but even when you're talking about in regards to economics, politics, philosophy, to me, people think that you got to make things much more difficult than it truly is. And a lot of those people are just like I don't know, they get this kind of concept in their head that they're holier than thou. But no, it's just accepting and understanding the reality. Well, that's the thing about it as a libertarian. Most things that a libertarian talks about are just well, if you're a philosophical libertarian such as myself, is just the understanding of natural human biology, of human psychology, not creating, some people would say utopia. No, what it is human, libertarian suggests, I don't have a right or authority. So what you're talking about when you're talking about libertarian values is I don't have an authority to superimpose my ideas on someone else. I hope other people accept them. And that's why a lot of people say that libertarians are more about economics. But what is economics? What is a representation? What is the core fundamental principle of economics? Is value, right? Value. So you can expand economics. People think that you need to separate economics from your personal social life, but actually economics is completely conducive with your social life because it's a representation of value. So just like if you were to go to consume or purchase a product, well, you're going to probably take some time out of your day to figure out which one's, person that did the actual background work to make sure that the product was actually reliable, did what they said it was going to do, had good quality involved. That's the same thing as what libertarians is. Libertarians don't suggest anything that's positive. So I don't know what's the best example, which is why when people say, well, why has there never been a libertarian government? Because a libertarian is not about imposing ideas on someone. It's just asking people to think critically about issues, being universally consistent with our morals and ethics, and then allowing people to question them. And when you were talking about even before, as far as like what's right or wrong, or like people today, when you go to school and you got postmodernists saying there's no such thing as right. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with or not, but historically, like I said, it was mostly people from religious institutions that were the dominant forces and influence to our general concept and knowledge in regards to social and economic habits and behaviors. But people subsequent that, so that's the beautiful thing about the human mind and the individual human mind, because each one of us is an individual in our mind. We only have one brain per person, right? Well, I get it. Yes, some people like to say, oh, there's co-joined twins. Okay, we're not talking about that 0.0000, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I find so funny with these people. They want to reject most normal common sense shit and just bring up. But I mean, because we all have individual minds, it's the onus is on us to allow that to flourish in a manner that's befitting of each individual, because it's only way that humans have ever shown that we can break free from some of the preconceived notions. I mean, if we didn't, right? I imagine a human civilization that we'd still be living in caves if we weren't conducive to allowing meritocracy or people to have their own way of establishing and understanding that general knowledge. But today, what I was trying to get to, and I was leading up to, is it started in the early 1900s, more along to the mid 1900s. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Aristotle you go back 2,500 years. But for the last 2,500 years, to try to, and Nietzsche acknowledged this too, but to try to get us away from mysticism, because people understand, well, when any concept that's built upon and trenched on mysticism can be used for bad or nefarious reasons. And we understand this. So we were trying to pivot away and using more scientific or objective measures as a means, not just in like economic or scientific realm, but even in human psychology and philosophy. Now, Ayn Rand was someone that used the basis of Aristotle and a lot of the things that he talked about during his time, and she built and expanded upon that in her philosophy, and she called it objectivism. Are you familiar with Ayn Rand?
Ayn Rand? I don't think so.
Okay, well, she was the daughter of a Russian that owned a business. This was back during the early days of the Russian Revolution, everything, and the communist regime took over her father's business. Anyways, she was just a really, really smart woman, and she wanted to figure out a way to help humans get away from the mysticism of religion, because we've understood that as much as it's good to have an abstract figure of authority rather than human-based authority, because that's the big problem we're all recognizing today. Everyone is we all have to have some kind of authority, as far as like where is that derived from?
Standard of values.
But it turns out every time we place it in the hands of some mystical authority, then people can interpret it in so many different ways and use that for their own nefarious reasons. So people like Ayn Rand said, let's make this more or less a scientific endeavor or undertaking. So she used her terminology of objectivism, where she used universally consistent language and everything. So just like as if you were trying to create a scientific based endeavor in any other undertaking, is you got to make sure, you know, it's repeatable, it's universal, you know, all the understandings of what it means to be scientific in nature. So she tried her best with her philosophy of objectivism, but she failed a little bit because she still left areas of the mind for the state, right? Which is still an abstract, right? Still this concept of an authority, right, that humans need to abide by. So it still left that little bit of room for mysticism, which is why today I see that people rejected the religion of old, but they use the state. State is their new religion. It's their new moral authority. Now, fast forward to today, or at least, and he started about, I think, 6 years ago, roughly around, Stefan Molyneux, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, he kind of helped expand upon that, because we're all hoping that we can translate and transition away from any form of mysticism. Even Jordan Peterson doesn't talk about God as, you know, people like myself understood God, like this guy sitting on the cloud, right? Back in the day, looking at us all, right? So we're all trying to pivot away from mysticism because we realize, yeah, that's bad, you know, terrible to place hands or this authority in some arbitrary figure that can be used for a nefarious purpose. But we've also turned, and Nietzsche once again acknowledged that right away, was, shit, once we killed God, no, now we're using humans. Fallible human beings is our new authority. Well, what I'm starting to understand nowadays, and that's why, like I say, people like Stefan Molyneux has started, he's done his thing. It's called universal preferable behavior. Basically what modern philosophers are trying to do today, people like Stefan Molyneux, expanding on the knowledge of Aristotle and on people like Ayn Rand, is let's try to figure out a way to make it so that human interaction, as far as how we deal with each other socially and economically, are so universally consistent, and the morals and ethics are so universal that, just like with science, just like 2 + 2 is 4, right? Just like gravity, I could drop something here, or I could drop something to the ground in China. It's both going to work out the same way, because gravity is universally consistent. So we're all trying to transition to this point, and that's what we're living in today. We're living in the day today where we're trying to transition to the point where we can reject mysticism completely, because we realize it can be definitely used for nefarious reasons. But I think everyone's come to the realization, just like Nietzsche did nowadays too, is, shoot, the minute we remove the abstract as far as authority, then we place that authority in human beings. And then, well, because every human being is fallible, well, then you end up, well, just like throughout history, that's what monarchs, that's what dictators, that's what pharaohs, right? They achieve their power from their gods, and they were the modern iteration, or the walking iteration of that authority. So we definitely don't want to place it in the hands of human beings. And then you end up with people, you know, like the 20th century, the entire, European landscape is dotted with a lot of dogmatists and ideologues that tried to make that moral authority part of the state. So this is the thing, this is the area where I'm so grateful to see, like I say, people like Stefan Molyneux, people like Jordan Peterson. These are the kinds of things that the teachers, especially in the higher aspects of our education system, should be starting to really, really discuss these things. Not necessarily, like I say, once you've got your basis, like for your academia, like your math, like science, like geography, history, that's fine. But once again, we, at some point in time, and I think that's what's going to happen, what's going to transition, what a modern iteration of education is going to have to entail and encompass the understanding of, we have to have some ground point where it's universally consistent, because once again, if it's subjective in nature, then it's going to be used for nefarious purpose. But if we can find some way to create an area of our intellect or a scientific undertaking where we can encompass morality and ethics into it, that's so universally consistent that it can't be denied, right? Just like I say, no one's going to deny that 2 + 2 is 4. But if we can get to that area at some point in time, I think that would be conducive for allowing the expansion of human liberty and the genuine expansion of human knowledge. Because once people have that ability to think critically about things, but deal with each other, because really what you're talking about is what we should do when you're dealing with each other, right? Because in your own personal realm, you know, if you're sitting in your room all by yourself, you can think whatever the hell you want. But when you're out socially interacting, whether socially or interacting economically, we have to come up with some fundamentals where there has to be universal consistency. But I definitely understand nowadays it does have to be, and it's weird because now I feel like My whole mindset. I went from a kid that rejected religion, rejected the indoctrination of the state. But now I find myself, because of people like Jordan Peterson and other people that have contributed to this conversation, now I realize that that's why religion was so important. I understand when I was a young lad, I rejected religion so much because, like, oh, I don't want to believe in this magicness and all this stuff. It doesn't have any basis in reality. The earth isn't 6,000 years old. But what it is a lot of the education that was given through people through the religious institution was based on their own interpretations. But the very core tenets, I think, are things that can be universalized. So if we can universalize them and leave them in the abstract and make social and economic activities at least where we can agree upon that can be universalized, if we can agree to those areas, then everything else should be like what you were suggesting or alluding to earlier, open to whatever the human mind can conceive of, because then it's just like whether you're talking about your family structure, your community structure, or the structure of a government, a country, or the world. As long as we understand how to deal with each other properly in a consistent manner, without, like, that's the problem with government and why people have so much problems with different, like, there's a constant battle of politics, right? Left versus right, or left versus right, because it's still subjective. It's my ideas should be deemed the final authority. Whereas, if you're a leftist, well, my idea should, no, if your ideas are conducive with genuine knowledge of human liberty, that's what should matter. There should be some kind of universal consistency, but only in the things that are negative in nature, as far as not imposing things on others, just accepting of universal norms and ethics in regards to ethics and morality. And then outside of that purview, just like if you were sitting down playing a board game, you're not going to want to sit down and play a board game with people if everyone wants to make up the rules as they go along. No, because it wouldn't even be conducive, right? Nobody's going to enjoy that if everyone gets to keep changing the rules. So there are some things when you're talking about morality and ethics that people have to be accepting that are universalized and can be proven so, because once again, the perfect example that Stefan Molyneux uses is, as one example, is like using preemptive force towards someone. Rape is a perfect example. You can't universalize that everybody wants to be raped, right? If you tried to make that a universally consistent narrative, just like with science, like gravity, the speed of, or the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second, I believe it is. But, or I guess they might have even messed around with that. But I mean, as long as you get things to a universal consistency, then everything else can be left open to interpretation and dealt with and be subjective in nature, because there are lots of areas of human knowledge and education where it is subjective, and that's how we can expand upon each other. But we still have to have some basis ground points, right?
Oh,
and
sure.
I think that's the biggest area where I don't necessarily know if the education system is properly conducive for that, which is why it's weird, because the rejecting of religion, now we're trying to find that in the education system. But because you have a lot of people in the education system that did come from historical mysticism of their preconceived notions or knowledge, or now we're trying to use that postmodernism where there is no such thing as true or false. Once again, I just keep thinking about when people are coming out of the education system, I don't even think they're actually genuinely coming out fully knowledgeable. They're like I say, they remind me of people that are decently well-trained apes, but they're not conducive with actually genuine human knowledge.
Yeah, and so basically, I appreciate you elaborating on that, and I completely agree with you on that, 100%. Like I personally feel that, like, it sounds like we're treading on the topic of consistent values, having consistent values and a sense of, what truly is good and bad, and to use that as a foundation to build our knowledge and understanding and stuff like that. Like it's just the reason why we have the golden rule, like treat others as you would like to be treated, because that is conductive to harmony. And I feel that I feel the goal of everyone in humanity is, how do we craft a harmonious world where we can all build together, because if everyone's, let's say, like take politics, for example. In politics, the left and the right, or whichever parties are involved, they just try to rip each other apart, try to slander each other, try to put each other down. They're trying to ruin each other, right? But what would be more productive is to have people build together, right? I think of one of the I know a quote that a lot of libertarians say is, I may not agree with you, but I will defend to the death your right to speak it. And I think that's very important, because that has the value of freedom of speech as a foundation to our society. We might disagree, people might disagree on how to reach a goal, but at least we have that goal as a foundation where we want to attain it. Harmony is the goal, let's say, for example. Let's say if let's say you have a society where half the people want there to be respect for human life, and let's say the other side feels that, if you don't like someone, you could kill them. You're going to have conflict with that, because now the foundation of the golden rule is just not there anymore, because now you have inconsistent values, right? So that's why values need to be consistent in order to have a productive community. And it's the same thing with, I feel, in the classroom, where that's why you have school rules. That's why you have classroom rules, where if the students follow it, it will be productive. Imagine if my classroom was complete free for all. And again, me being in the beginning of my teaching career, there are some times where I lose control of the class, right? And it becomes detrimental to the education of the students. And then I have to struggle to regain it back and be like, okay, let's get back on track, students. Let's focus here, right? Because we need to have everyone, focus on what the goal is, because if it's total anarchy, no one's going to be able to build off of that. That's why there's a difference between libertarians and anarchists. Anarchists is as far as I understand, complete free for all. There's no rules, whatever, right? But at least with libertarianism, we acknowledge that there are some rules we need to follow, but it just shouldn't overwhelm us and control our lives, let's say statism does, or authoritarianism, right? So that's why we have to find that sweet spot, and it's very tricky. You don't want to be completely anarchist, but you also don't want to be completely authoritarian either. You need to find a middle ground, and of course, we want to try and limit government as much as possible, so that way people have freedom, because freedom is what's important, and that's what I feel reflects a lot of North American culture, is the fact that we value our freedom. Now, unfortunately, I find that a lot of the, let's say, cultural Marxists and communists, socialists, they're focusing more on, oh shoot, where was I going with this? I was basically saying that, want a consistent form of values. Oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Darn, happens. Well, basically, we just want to avoid conformity, but at the same time, we also need to have some sort of foundation where we all respect one another. We all have mutual respect, and again, that's why we have the golden rule. You have different religions like Christianity, you have Islam, you have Hinduism, right? But as long as they all have the same core values, which is love, forgiveness, respect, harmony. As long as these values are consistent, they're all going to live together very peacefully. Look at Canada, for example. Through the ideals of, let's say, Pierre Trudeau, he was trying to, as far as I understand, he was trying to craft a multicultural Canada. I feel that a multicultural Canada will work great as long as we have those consistent values. So that's why, in our community, there's a Muslim community that's very that lives close to me, but I find that they're very wonderful people, because they share the same Canadian values that I do. We both believe in love and respect and charity and stuff like that. Same thing with, let's say, other religions as well, and that's where we can have a productive society. But again, the values must be consistent, and that's why we have to have make sure that the people that are in our country reflect those values of freedom. Freedom is important. Security is also important, but of course we need to safeguard our freedom, and that's where we can have a cohesive society, and that's very important. So, and that's why, as a teacher, I embrace the diversity that we have in our country, but at the same time, we still have core values. I teach. I've been teaching in a Catholic school system, right? And not to say that Catholicism is objectively advantageous to other religions or irreligions. I'm not saying that at all. But at the same time, in the classroom, even though there's people of different cultural descent. You know, some people that are from African descent, some people from Jamaican descent, some people from Japanese descent, some people from European descent. You know, we have people of different cultures, but what keeps us all together is our core values of, you know, forgiveness and trust as taught by Jesus Christ, right? Now, if we were to be in a public system, which is like secular, you can still have those mutual values, which is written in the, you know, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, where, you know, we value freedom, we value mutual respect, harmony, not to harm one another. You know, basically, like there's principles that we follow to be decent people. But if you have, let's say, someone who sympathizes with the value system of, let's say, ISIS or the KKK, those values are completely contradictory to Canadian values or Catholic values or the values of any religion that follows the practice of harmony and stuff like that. That's why harmony and freedom and you know, those virtues are very, very foundational, and they need to be consistent with all people. Yes, diversity is fine. Yes, diversity is great, but we still need to have uniform values, because if we have a diversity of values and inconsistent values, we're going to have, you know, conflict and stuff, which isn't good. You know, and that again correlates to the classroom. That's why we have classroom rules. That's why we have like law, basically, that to make sure that we're following things in a conductive way. You know, and like even the law, you know, like let's say the Canadian law, for example, can be up to question. You know, like for example, you have let's say pro-life and pro-choice. You know, there's a lot of people who believe in being pro-choice, and some people who believe in being pro-life. You know, and in the law, like let's say the current law as of right now, it supports abortion, but there's a lot of people who are pro-life that say, you know what, no, that's they don't believe that that's moral, right? But nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make is that yes, we on the individual level, we have our subjective understanding, we have our subjective perception, okay? But then we get together and we kind of figure out, okay, what laws should we put in place so that we all follow these laws, so that way we have a harmonious society. And then on the level above that, we have morality, which is like, okay, how should these laws be constructed? Because imagine if, like, let's say our society was founded upon, let's say, a dictatorship where morality and legality is up to the discretion of one person. Like, that's awful. Like we've seen throughout history that there's been a lot of ruthless dictators that have taken advantage of that to the detriment of the people. And if we were to leave it up to pure democracy, where let's say it was mob rule, a person could be innocent of a charge, and yet if our society was built on mob rule, then and the people say, oh, I think that person's guilty, now it's subjective. Now the person might get prosecuted or even potentially, God forbid, killed because of public opinion. But instead, if we have a list of laws, which we have today, thankfully, we follow the law instead. We're basically, we all create the laws beforehand, and we just have to abide by that, right? And of course, if there's laws that are inconsistent with morality, that's where we have the realm of morality, where we figure out, okay, what's good and what's not good, and how do we fix our laws to the point where it reflects positive morality. And we might be wondering, okay, what really is moral? From my understanding, even though like I'm Catholic and I have an inclination toward Catholicism, I feel that as long as it's conducive to harmony, where we can all live harmoniously and we all have mutual respect with each other, regardless of our agreements or disagreements, we'll have a conducive society where we build upon one another's knowledge. And that's where diversity of thought can flourish. We can have diversity of thought because we have morality as our foundation, right? And on top of that, once we have that foundation of love, respect, and harmony, we can then have diversity of thought and share ideas and build each other, as opposed to trying to rip each other apart, you know? And again, it reflects the education system again, because, you know, like our students are very diverse, and I think that's wonderful. But the other thing that's wonderful is the fact that we have our consistent values, you know, whether you're in a Catholic school system, whether you're in a public school system, whether it's a Jewish school system, Muslim school system, again, it has to be all values that bring us all together and make us all cohesive. It's the values that are important. And I feel that largely reflects, I think, what you were saying. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Oh, yeah, I'm back. Okay. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, yes, subjectivity in your personal life, you know, when you're just dealing with yourself, completely conducive with the human experience. And I expect every one of us should do that. You know, challenge yourself in many different areas of human knowledge or anything, or your physical, do your thing. Everything in the private should be subjective and up to you as far as how you want to deal with things, how you want to think about things. What we're really talking about, it doesn't matter, like I say, it doesn't matter if you're talking about the family structure, a community structure, or a government and the people structure. There has to be a realm where objectivity has to take precedent. Because like I said, if you're dealing with someone, and this is something that, like I said, doesn't matter if you're talking to someone from Canada, the US, or China, or anywhere around the world, I think most people would agree with like the universal ethics of don't hit, don't steal, right? Don't use preemptive violence. These are things that can be universalized. 100%, you can universalize them, and they can be proven to be objectively a benefit for each and every one of us. You can't lay a level to it, but you can say that it is always a benefit to be objective in nature in as far as how you deal with people. So there are people that like to use caveats. So an example is, you shouldn't cause harm to someone, but if someone's, killing someone else, that you like killing someone that you love or causing harm to someone, you should be able to use preemptive force against them to prevent them from harm to someone. But you're still sticking in line with the key fundamentals and core aspects of universal consistent moral and ethics. So you're not to use preemptive force against anyone that's not harming someone else. So it comes down to self-defense or the defense of others. And like I say, this is the thing. I didn't realize this when I was growing up, because it all seemed to, because the way it was portrayed or told in stories through the Bible, it's just teaching people some good morals and ethics. Now, if we're going to bring this kind of stuff into the education system, although once again, I don't necessarily think the public education system is the best place to gain your morals. I think that's something that should come from, like I say, your family structure or different areas of how humans cohabitate and coexist with each other, because it's not something that can be imposed upon you. Government is that one entity that can impose upon you. So, whether it's the church or like charity institution or think tanks or anyone else or objectivist philosophers or people like Stefan Molyneux, there's lots of areas and ways that we can get some kind of understanding in regards to morals and ethics. That is, like I say, this is the problem with what we see today, is that's something that seems to be brought to the classroom. And it's because people are turning more and more away from religion. But if you're going to bring morality into the classroom, then once again, you have to stick to things that are, as you suggested, are universally consistent. And then, hammer out the rest of the stuff, discuss everything else. But at the very least, every one of us in our own personal lives or in our professional lives or even just in our social lives, understand intrinsically. It's not even something that most people have to think about. They just understand intrinsically that if you treat people with respect, if you treat people as if they're an autonomous individual, then most of the time you'll get that reciprocal action or pretense of their own stance back to what you afforded to you. The problem is, though, because there is no answer, because we've shown time and time again, not me, but people that have talked about this stuff, there is no one size fits all answer anymore, because once again, we have to either keep morality outside the education system in the abstract. But once again, that can be interpreted by some people who want to use sophistry or particular kinds of language to interpret it in ways for their own nefarious reasons. But we're all going to, at some point in time, that's what I like about having these kind of discussions, is our education system is predominantly getting more and more entrenched into talk about morality and ethics, and well, especially up into the higher aspects of the post-secondary education. But if you are going to have that area, then allow, like I say, you can't have any area where you only have people being taught from one side of a political spectrum or from an ideological bent. You have to have some kind of universally consistency in that kind of knowledge. And that's why I think it's so important, which is why and I'm getting more back, I'm going to actually lead back more to the education aspect of this, is today we have, I don't know how many tens of thousands of teachers out there, and a lot of them are good. A lot of them also, though, are failing their students tremendously, and we see that in all the statistics that are coming out. I mean, what is it? I think it was 18% of women, and I believe it was 22 or 23% of men are coming out of education these days completely financially and economically literate. So even the actual academic functions that are supposed to be properly taught, leaving out morality completely. But once again, when you're talking about economics, there's value entrenched in that. So if we had proper, you don't even have to bring morality. This is the thing that I don't understand, why things have gotten so away from understanding areas of economics. Because economics, from what I understand, is one area of the human mind where ethics and morality is actually baked right into the cake. Just like if you go all the way back to Adam Smith, it's not the benevolence of the butcher or the baker, right? It's the fact that that person wants to provide for themselves and their family. So they're going to be, it's not that they're being naturally altruistic. There's a selfishness involved there, but that's a great benefit to society because that person, by their selfish desire and needs, is expanded out on other one. And because they're doing it in a voluntary manner, like that's the beautiful thing of why capitalism and Christianity, especially after the Reformation, this was the big problem before the Reformation is Christianity, the Old Testament, right? It was more conducive with that top-down authoritarianism or collectivism or the sacrifice of the individual, the denial of free will. It was amazing to me that a lot of great minds throughout history advanced and developed Christianity and encompassed that capitalist model as far as economics, but maintain that same kind of value structure. The thing about free market kind of and Christianity and why they're so conducive and not even in combative as far as roles against each other, because each and every one of us rely on to be even exchange, right? Trying to provide for yourself, but at the same time being expansive to the point where you can help others as well. Like if I can provide for myself and my family, but at the same time offer someone else, like, you know, if I'm good at like building engines, if I can build engines for people, that's great for me because that's something I like to do. It's something I'm knowledgeable in, and then it benefits the other people on the other side of the equation. But once again, I did the altruistic measures. I did it for a somewhat quasi-selfish reason, but it was benevolent on the other side of the equation by sheer fact that someone else gained a benefit. There wasn't a loss. It was for both of us. That's why I don't understand why people are turning away from like the freedom aspects of our social and economic. Freedom and liberty are the things that are completely conducive with what you're suggesting, and it's as it pertains to the education system. So if we had a truly free instead of a structure, you know, imposed on us by one size fits all approach, then you would see that, like you were alluding to earlier, like there would be certain as far as the objective universe and the real world and how you deal with each other, and it's understand that economic, like I said, bring into it, right? You don't have to bring any mysticism in it, but you can those kind of moral values, and without even bringing morality into the equation, just by sheer fact that people understand how we do, it has to be conducive and beneficial to each other for it to be for truly benefit. Because like I might be able to get away, I might be able to steal from someone today, but at the same time, the minute I've created an area where stealing is something, well, so as there's always a self-fulfilling prophecy or a motive behind doing the right thing, even if it's not necessarily conducive for you today, but because humans, we live today, we live tomorrow, we live next week, we always keep that entrenched in our mind. So to me, education should be a matter of teaching people, like you were saying, the fundamental aspects of academia, you know, all the things that we matter. But if you're going to bring morality into the equation, into the education system, allow for the people that are truly competent and are putting out these kind of things in a free market type environment, and it'll be conducive because you'll see much more people will gravitate to them because they're not being superimposed with ideas. They're being allowed to voluntarily choose to adopt those ideas. And today, what I see, like I was kind of saying earlier, you might have tens of thousands of teachers, but out of those tens of thousands of teachers, you know, by sheer acknowledgement of the Pareto distribution principle, is a very small percentage of those teachers, maybe you're one of them, are actually much more competent in the particular academic subject that they're teaching. And why do we need to confine or restrain the fact that, like, let's say you're the best, I'm just going to use an example. Let's say Mario is the best teacher in history, or one of the best at the top.
What an honor.
Why? No, but let's just say, why would we want to restrict to a small classroom of 30 students that have to spend, and let's say you were teaching, or actually no, history, because that would be in your main, but I'm talking like even post-secondary. Why would we want to restrict to a very small classroom with a very small number of people learning from some of the greatest minds when we have the age of the internet and information, where someone like you, if you were, like I say, at the top or echelons of that knowledge, you could teach tens of thousands of people. And why and this cost structure, because this is actually the part that I really want to talk about, is the cost structure of our education system is constantly getting higher and higher. I mean, now you're having students today, my oldest son even, and this was when he took his business degree in a college in New Brunswick. It was 2 years. That was cheap compared to now, but it was like $28,000 or something. And it's only gotten more. Whereas you could get that same kind of knowledge, that same kind of education by like a professor that put that on. And Jordan Peterson is one of those people, like he's puts a lot of his lectures online. You get a lot of that education, but because of the replication and the ability of social media, because, you know, with the beautiful thing about the digital information age is you can replicate and reproduce that same thing for a very, very tiny fraction of the cost. You don't need the bricks and mortar. You don't have to build a whole bunch of extra schools, or so you can have that kind, or books, right? Because books, that's another thing. Think about even just a book. You would have to go out. Well, somebody's got to print it. You got to have the ink. You got to have the paper. You got to have the hardcover or soft cover. You got to be the art, right? There's a lot of thing that's involved with even just producing a book. Whereas today you can replicate that in the online digital sphere for literally pennies on the dollar. So why are we stuck with our kids keep ramming to the tunes of tens of thousands every year just in one particular province alone? But just each school, they're pumping out all these kids out of these education system, cost them a tremendous amount of money that's going to really burden them and go saddle them with a lot of debt. And it's actually what I've noticed too, because of all that debt, and a lot of people have acknowledged this, they're having to put off how long they're going to family. It's just affecting so much of the population and our social activities that I think the best thing that we can do is at least allow some kind of freedom to happen as far as in the education system, and allow things like what Jordan Peterson was alluding to. Let's have some online universities. Let's have some alternative areas and venues where we can create some areas of education that's more conducive, especially for for poor people. Like if you're a leftist and you're all caring about the poor people in society, the best thing you can do for them is, you know, give them the opportunity to not have to necessarily go through the public education system as far as post-secondary. You know, maybe they can get this kind of knowledge at, like I say, a fraction of the cost. But that's the thing, because government structures everything from such a top-down methodology, it's very difficult to even create any area, and accreditation is going to be the biggest hurdle, I think, to get over, as far as even once we do start creating some of these online universities or colleges or courses, is allowing someone on the other end of it to have some form of accreditation, but without a free market. That's the thing. Without a free market, without our ability to freely create these business or economic or education models, nobody's going to know how much of a benefit they're going to actually bring to each and every one of us. So this is where, to me, this is where the government and education, this is where we have to kind of pivot further away from allowing government to dictate and dominate how people are educated.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a number of things that you brought up that were great points I want to talk about. So for one, yeah, like you were saying about, let's say there's the best teacher in the world, and I appreciate you using me as an example. I mean, I'm still early in my career, so a lot for me to learn. But I'll use let's say Dr. Jordan Peterson, for example. Like he definitely has a lot of insight that I feel is very unique and can really benefit people a lot. So that's where, you know, you can use, let's say, his videos in a classroom discussion. Like I know there's one situation of a woman named Lindsay Shepherd who used a debate between Jordan Peterson and someone else. I forgot his name, but he represented the left, and I take it that Jordan Peterson challenged them on that. She showed that video in the classroom in I think it was in post-secondary. Students were fine with it. They were engaged with it. There was like a conversation about it, a discussion, different points of views, and it was great. But then the higher uppers in that university, I think this was at Wilfrid Laurier, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, they stepped in and they're saying like, why are you doing this? This is unsafe, blah blah blah, right? And she got in trouble for it. But the thing is that thankfully that conversation was exposed and people listened to it and they kind of heard what was going on. She just showed that video for the sake of conversation. And the thing is, like, I'm not Jordan Peterson. Lindsay Shepherd isn't Jordan Peterson. But the thing is, we can use the lessons of Jordan Peterson in our classroom, and then we could say, what do you the students think? Let's have a discussion about that, right? So we can utilize the other teaching of the great teachers, let's say, and use that in our own classrooms. Because again, like there's only one of each individual. Like there's only one of me, right? Like, so you know, and there might be some things that you know that I say that are of unique value that other people might use in let's say their classroom, or same thing for Lindsay Shepherd or for anyone else. You know, like that's what makes the world beautiful, is that we're all different and that we all have different voices and we all have different perspectives. But again, of course, as we spoke about earlier, we need to have that foundational value system where that's why like the golden rule is a thing: treat others as you'd like others to be treated, you know. And that's the, like, I think that phrase is the most conductive to harmony, you know. And I also just remember something I was going to say earlier about people on the far left, cultural Marxists and whatnot, is that they and I'm sure you would agree with this, I feel that they put more focus on security over freedom, which I think is dangerous, because I mean, you can make the top security, like if top security is your priority, if security is the top priority, and you're not necessarily giving as much attention to freedom, then that's only going to lead to birds in a cage, where we're all going to be birds in a cage sort of thing, akin to 1984 or any of these other dystopian novels. And that's something we really need to avoid. So yes, like, yeah, you might have good intentions in mind where you want people to be safe, but at the same time, without freedom, what's the point of living? You know, so we need to have a life worth living where we have our freedoms and try to have as much security as possible, but not to the detriment of freedom, you know? And that's where, that's my understanding of the far left and the cultural Marxists. And that's why I'm not really inclined on their level. But where I do understand where they're coming from is the fact that, or not just them, but like just the left in general, is the fact that we want to be accounted. We want to account for everyone, you know, like we don't want to have any lost sheep. We want to make sure that everyone matters and stuff like that. And I'm completely on board with that. But at the same time, it's how we do it. How do we accomplish that? You know, like I remember we were talking about like competition between different students, and that might motivate them. One issue I see with the education system, and this is something that I feel would be a core system change for the school system. This is the way I see it. I feel that we need to change it from a time-based progression to an individual progress-based movement for each individual student. Because right now in our education system, I know this might seem like a tangent, but basically you have some students, let's say you have one classroom of students. You have some students that are gifted, that like will get things right away, they'll excel and stuff like that. And you have other students who might find the material more challenging, right? Now you have like this, inconsistency in the classroom where some students are doing extremely well and other students who are struggling, right? But they're in the same classroom. Like there's some, like let's say math, for example, like in the classroom, you might have a student that has, let's say this is a grade 5 classroom. I'll give an example of a grade 5 classroom, okay? Let's say in the grade 5 classroom, you have a couple of students who are at the grade 8 level of math. They could do math at the grade 8 level. Okay, they're very exceptional in math. And you have another group of students who are, let's say, at a grade 4 level of math, right? And then those students that are having a grade 8 level of math might have a grade 4 level of reading. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of nuances involved where, like, you know, but the problem is that they're all being confined to a grade 5 classroom. Instead, I feel that if we could divvy it up where, you know, the students that could perform at a grade 8 level for math should be placed in a math class of that grade level. And then when they need to learn at, let's say, something that they're having trouble with, like, let's say, for example, that individual student who's really good at math but not so good at reading, when it comes down to learning about reading, they'll be placed in a grade 4 environment. And it doesn't have to be age-based, you know, like I feel like students that are gifted and, let's say, able to excel, they're being held back, and the students who are being challenged are being pushed forward beyond their comfort to the point where they end up being lost, and that's not productive at all. And then they end up being lost, and then we try to push them along, and then the school system wants to, like, increase the amount of high school graduates, so they start, like, you know, trying to modify things, and then the accreditation goes down, and there's inconsistencies with accreditation, which isn't good. And that's where I feel that if we use technology a lot more with the education system, now you can have progress that's like akin to, let's say, Khan Academy, as I think we discussed earlier, where, you know, students are able to learn at their own pace. But at the same time, you can have a facilitator, like, let's say, a teacher, who will kind of observe them and help them along the way as well. And my ideal situation, what I think would be best is, let's say you have a classroom environment where, let's say, students of a certain level in a particular subject are in one classroom for, like, let's say an hour, let's say, and you don't have one but three teachers, let's say, that kind of go around. They kind of act like coaches, and they coach students to building themselves up and going through the online curriculum, let's say, of let's say their particular school. So that way they go at their own pace. Okay, they're not being pushed along, they're not being held back, but they're going based on how well they do, and based on how they're learning, you know. And at the same time, like, there's websites, let's say Knowledge Hook. Knowledge Hook is a website where students are able to learn content that's online, and they learn at their own pace. But one of the concerns I heard from another teacher, I had a discussion with another teacher, and she was saying that her concern is that when a student gets something wrong on the internet, let's say, or let's say a student gets something wrong on, let's say, work that they have to do through Knowledge Hook, let's say, for example, if they get it wrong, they'll end up guessing, and then they'll guess until they get it right and then move on. I feel that, okay, maybe that's not a downfall of technology in its entirety, but maybe that's a downfall of the design of that individual website. So I feel that if we have different competition of different services, like, let's say, Khan Academy, Knowledge Hook, Duolingo, when it comes to, let's say, learning another language, Rosetta Stone, whatnot, right? We can find, schools can figure out, okay, which service is best suited to the learning of our students, and move up for that. Okay. I'll give you another example. I used to work at a school called Focus. I used to work at Focus Learning, and also worked at a place called Hatch Canada. Okay. They're both quite similar, but I just know that with Hatch Canada, I know that with them, it was a coding school for kids. Okay. Where kids learn how to code. And by the way, as an aside, I feel that school systems should include computer programming as a curriculum alongside math and science. Very, very important. We're not there yet, unfortunately, but we hope to do that soon. But anyway, that's just an aside. With Hatch Canada, what they did was, basically, there's a whole list of programming activities that students can do, and they do it at their own pace. They choose what projects they want to do, and they learn from it. And the instructions on how to code is given in English instructions. Okay, basically, it says, okay, draw, like it says, use computer code to draw a basketball, let's say, for example. Like, it'll say that in English, okay? But if they don't know how to do it, if the student doesn't know how to do it, they can click a button that says break it down, and then it breaks it down to pseudocode, where it's like in between English and code, straight code, right? So it kind of gives them an idea, okay, I can use this to craft what I need to do. But if they're still confused, then they could break it down even further, and then bring it out to be straight code, right? So then they'll start practicing with the straight code, right? And then get the thing to work. And then as they build and refine themselves, they'll be able to break down their instructions less. And then by breaking down their instructions less, they get more points, right? And then they get to a point where they reach their confidence, where they can create a program based on just English instructions. And that's where you know that they're progressing to be a stronger coder. And then, of course, like, you have, like, let's say, concepts that you learn in coding. Let's say, for example, the concept of variables, the concepts of conditional statements, the concept of loops. Like, I have a computer science background because of the fact that, I studied game development in university, which is very programming heavy, so I'm able to teach that to my students. But the thing is, they can learn those concepts. Like, let's say the teacher in that classroom could take maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes to explain a certain concept in code, and then students can use what they've learned in their coding on their development of how they're progressing, and they progress at their own pace, and the teachers now are kind of like coaches now. They're facilitators, right? And then there could be like little things around where students can look at it, like little pieces of paper or whatnot, that kind of describe how to do a certain thing in code. And they'll be like, oh, now I remember. Like, they can kind of refresh their memory. They can research it on the internet and then try to accomplish their coding tasks, right? So now it's student-led. And the thing is, in order to prevent the whole guesswork thing, you just have an area where students are able to break it down, okay? Now, in the context of, let's say, math, if you have to solve a math problem, now we're going back to the public education system. Let's say that there's a math problem that they have to solve, and they're not getting it. Rather than just, like, not breaking it down for them and them continuing to guess what the answers are until they end up getting it right, instead, we could say, okay, this student got this question wrong. Let's try to break it down and kind of remind them of, like, earlier aspects of math that they've learned, and have them solve those smaller questions. And then once they answer those smaller questions, then they can use that toward answering the larger question. Like, for example, let's say you have to figure out, I don't know, let's say you have, like let's say counting, for example, right? You have usually they use blocks of like 100. Okay, like let's say you have a block and there's like 100 squares in that block that represents 100. Okay, and then there's like blocks that are in a straight line that's represent the number 10, and then there's individual blocks that represent the number 1, right? If let's say the student gets that answer wrong, they could the question can then break down, okay, how many ones are there, right? Okay, how many 10s are there? So let's add them together. Okay, there's 6 ones and there's 3 10s. So what's 10 plus, sorry, what's 3 10s plus 6 ones? What does that equal? You know, and break it down further until they get it. And then once they get that, then they can figure out the final answer for that. They can figure out the final answer for that individual question. So it's a matter of breaking things down in every instance of a question for them to kind of, you know, figure out, okay, this is where the question is leading, and then figure it out without having to do guessing, right? That sort of design would be beneficial. And that design, like, basically was full front in Hatch Canada, right? And the same thing with focus learning. Focus learning also followed a very similar way of going about their coding lessons and stuff. So I feel that that kind of scenario is the best way forward. You know, again, it's akin to, let's say, Duolingo, where with Duolingo, it's an app where people can learn another language. And basically with Duolingo, you learn the basics first, right, before you move on. And let's say you move on, you learn the other things, but then you kind of, you know, start to get confused a little bit, and you start to, you know, start to have a more challenging time with it. You can go back to the earlier lessons and try to refine those. And if you're not consistent with the lessons, then the gauge that you have on individual lessons will start to go down. So you have to revisit them and go back and bring them back up to help you with the future lessons you have to learn, you know? And I remember another teacher would say, hey, you know what, like, how can we teach geometry if students don't know how to count, let's say, for example, right? And that's extremely important. And that's why, you know, you have some students that are just lagging behind because, let's say, they found learning about how to count challenging in their earlier grades, but because of time-based progression of our current school system, they were just pushed along forward, and they lacked their understanding of how to count. Now they're doing geometry, they're completely lost. And now the teacher's like, oh shoot, like I'm in a grade, let's say I'm in a grade 6 classroom where they're supposed to learn geometry, but they didn't learn proper counting mechanisms of grade 3. So now I have to go back to the grade 3 level to teach these individual students. And yet there's other students who have the knowledge, the capacity to learn at a grade 8 level. Now it's like they're having to like jump around and like cater to different students in one classroom. But instead, I feel that if students were to learn on their own accord and learn at their own progression with a facilitator, maybe not just 1, but 3 teachers in that room, now you can have students learning at their own progression, and they're not being pushed forward, they're not being held back, they're learning as they go, and that way they learn in the best way, and they basically you know, they find more success, you know, and you won't have people who are lost in the future. You won't have people that were held back and that their growth was delayed, you know. And that's why I feel that if we were to make the education system more autonomous and more individualized to the student level, they'll find a lot more value in the system. And, you know, and if there's issues with the system, they might just be kinks in the system that we have to fix, you know, not necessarily that, oh, the educational, the technological paradigm of, like, you know, technology-based learning is bad, you know, if something goes wrong. No, it might be, might need to be a few design tweaks, let's say. Like anything that's lacking in knowledge hook shouldn't be a basis for, because knowledge hook leads students to do guesswork, that means that using technology to do education is bad. No, that's not what it means. It just means that the design can be improved. We need to iterate on that design so that way students learn in the best way possible, you know? I apologize if my explanation sounds confusing, but yeah, this is just my idea on how we can make it like Hatch Canada and Focus Learning and systems like that, you know, where they learn on their own pace. So yeah, I'm just curious to know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, basically what it all just keeps coming back to me time and time again, no matter how many different areas or ways we come at this topic or this subject, it always just keeps coming back the same thing. This competition allow for, like, the free market. So freedom. So when it doesn't matter if you're talking about education in the social sphere, business, like I say, whatever undertaking or endeavor that you seek to enter into, then just that freedom is the only thing. And because once you have freedom, well, competition is naturally built into freedom, right? Because humans are inherently, that's literally our evolutionary strategy. Not just humans, actually, all living species is competing, right, for resources. It's competition. That is what it is to be a human being. Now, some are, some are better than others, but to me, that's the thing. Allow competition to happen. Allow competition to flourish. And the best takeaway we can get is at the end of it, on the other side of it, let the final product speak for itself. Doesn't matter if you, like I say, doesn't matter if you're talking about a tangible product or the person that comes out on the other side of the education system. You can use accreditation, you can use lots of examples, you can use diplomas, but at the end of the day, just like with me going back to my racing heritage, there's lots of teachers that teach even like, high performance tuning, right, in school. John Force's mechanic, right? I'm like I say, I'm a drag racer guy. John Force's mechanic, no formal education, probably one of the best engine builders you'll ever see on the planet. Let the end product speak for itself. To me, that's the biggest takeaway from this conversation. I hope anyone that's paying attention, that's the biggest take I want you all to understand and take away from this conversation is competition, freedom. Doesn't matter if you're in your social sphere or your economic sphere, because really we're talking about humans always place value, right? Well, we're always placing value on every area of like our social or economic interactions. So allow people to acknowledge and recognize competence of others, because if you allow freedom, like anything that's constrained, you're not going to see who's most competent, because if everyone's constrained or restrained to a particular ideology or a dogma, well, you're only going to find whoever's the best at repeating and regurgitating. You're only going to find the best trained SEALs, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with some really, really well-trained SEALs. Hey, I'll pay for it to go see them anytime, right? It's good entertainment. But that's not what education is entailed. Like education or advancement, human knowledge and intellect, which is what the education is supposed to be all about, is allow the end product to speak for itself. And you're never going to have that's not conducive with the kind of social structures as far as the education system we have currently. But like I said, we live in the age of information. We'll see the final product, just like, you can, a lot of people, you can go out today, you can do the experiment, do it yourself. Hey, make this actually part of the education process. Go start your own little experiment. Let's, a great example would be start your own little small business, right? Grade 9, grade 10. Let's let everyone go out and start an entrepreneur. You'll find out that there's going to be variances and levels in regards to the competence of each person, what they brought to the table, and what the final product or what they have to offer to not just, like I said, that's going to benefit them, but for society at large. So just allowing that competition is the only thing that I think is going to be completely conducive with allowing, because you never know who that one individual is. A lot of these individuals that are trying to think outside the box, like I say, they might be our modern day Galileo. That might be that one person that takes the information that people like Stefan Molyneux or Jordan Peterson. There's somebody out there that might help expand upon our knowledge in regards to psychology, sociology, and even what liberty entails. There's somebody out there that might be that, but they might be constrained or restrained at this point because they're stuck in this system that they're not allowed to put forth or present their own particular way of talking or discussing about these things. Allow that freedom to happen. Like I say, there's no area, and I've never heard anyone actually put forth an argument yet. Like I say, it doesn't matter if you're in your social life, your personal life, your family life, or your economic life. Nobody can suggest, and I've never heard anyone ever suggest, that it was a detriment to have competition. I've never, ever heard of that ever. Like, competition allows you, it's actually the only way. If the critical thinking is literally to have lots of different people giving you lots of different information from different variables and inputs, because that's the only way you're going to expand upon your knowledge. Absent of that, you're getting indoctrinated. That's all you're getting. So like I say, I think we're coming back to, once again, allow competition. And because we live in the information age, like, there's no reason to prevent or to succumb to this one size fits all approach. 100 years ago, I understand why that might have been the only way to do things. It was the easy way. It was more conducive with creating a population that was more about being industrious, right? I get it. And we still need industrious people. But those people can go to the areas or venues that's more conducive for them. The people that want to go to the higher knowledge as far as like understanding of philosophical, just allow that freedom, allow competing models instead of just a one public education system. Allow some private. I'm not ashamed to say, listen, I would love to see some private education, just like with healthcare. Allow freedom. If people want to have some kind of socialized healthcare or even education system, I'm all for that, as long as you ask me to participate voluntarily, because like I say, I would be more than willing to pay for a public education system if I could see where there was actual not a one size fits all approach where the teachers had the ability to just be themselves, and there wasn't unions and all kinds of bureaucrats and administrators that were trying to dictate how they teach their students. Doesn't matter if it's public or private. I want to see the end result at the end of the day. I want to see what's going to come out on the other side of this. Not just for the money, but even for society at large, because like I say, even if you want to live in a democracy, I'm not a fan of mob or majority rule, but in modern developed Western democracies, we at least historically, although it's getting further away from a lot of people these days, it was the whole pretense is, okay, we'll allow majority or mob rule, but it was only to vote on certain things. It wasn't to take away other people's money. But this is the thing, when you don't have a properly educated populace that can think critically about these issues, I hear people all the time, and there's a lot of people that actually would benefit from freedom, but because they've been taught to regurgitate the stuff they've been taught by people in academia, they're all about collectivism or equality of outcome. They're actually shooting themselves in the foot, and I think it's a shame, because there's a lot of people, and a lot of them are from the left, because I've recognized that people that come from the left are very creative in nature, and a lot of these people might very well be the ones that can help in some way. But if you keep sticking them into this box of like postmodernism or culture Marxism, or this constantly thinking that it's just about a victim or an oppressor. No, allow, like I said, you're not helping any kid or any adult by constantly telling them that you're forever. Like if I told my kids, oh, you're a white male, so sorry, man, you're going to be considered a second-class citizen for the rest of your life. You just might as well get used to it. Well, to me, that would be a great detriment. I would feel like I failed my son tremendously. So I always explain to them that there's some perilous stuff in the world. There's stuff that you're going to have to prepare yourself for. But I want you to at least have some confidence. But that confidence has to come from what you've done with the tools that you've been given. So I don't want you to be overly confident. I'm not going to give you an award just because you put the spoon up your mouth to feed yourself. That's something that everyone can do. No, I want to reward you when you've stepped outside and you've done something at least exceptional in some manner, which tells me that you're trying to achieve or strive for success and do better yourself in some manner. That's, like I say, getting back to meritocracy and rewarding people, the competent people. And even, like I say, the people that say, well, what about the poor people at the bottom? Even the people at the very, very bottom, the last two, like I said very early on, they're still going to be competing with each other. So even the people that you think are so helpless and useless and just, leave them down there. No, as a matter of fact, they're going to the best opportunity ever to advance themselves is even the people at the very bottom competing with each other. That's always going to help every single one of us. And that's a universal message that I think we should all be able to get behind. But anyways, Mario, before I tie this up, because we have been going a little while here now, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, big time. I was scrolling a little earlier when you're talking, and actually a lot of people have been in the chat here, and I just wanted to maybe reference a few things if you don't mind. Do you mind, or did you want? No, I don't mind. Go ahead and actually, if you want to say something, then I can go to this. Or
yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. So there's just a couple of things I want to say. I would agree. Like, let's say regarding costs, like as of right now, the education system is being funded by the taxpayer, and I feel that the least we can do with the taxpayers' money is try to lessen the cost as much as possible. Because right now in our country, we're being taxed to death, and I think that's awful. And I feel that there's ways to reduce costs without impeding upon, let's say, the well-being of society. I know there's a lot of people that would like the education system to be totally free market and whatnot. That would be nice. I feel that as of right now, it's going to be a little bit tricky to implement that as of right now, but I'm definitely interested in seeing where that can go, if it will be to the benefit of our society, both for those of low income and of any other income. Okay. Also, what I really feel is important is for all students of low income to be getting education regardless of their economic situation. Because, like, yes, we want to have like having equality of outcomes, I think, is awful. And we've seen it throughout history, like with communism and stuff like that. It's not worked, and it brought a lot of people into poverty. So I feel that we should definitely avoid that. But one thing we need to focus on, especially as educators, is to ensure that we have equality of opportunity, right? And in order for us to have equality of opportunity, is everyone needs to have an adequate education, or at least a well done education, right? So that's why I feel that as of right now, making a completely free market like today would be quite tricky. So I feel that as of right now, keeping it taxpayer funded for now would be, I think, okay for now. because we want to make sure that every student has access to a quality education. And Canada's education is actually very good across compared to the rest of the world. I mean, I feel it still could be better. It could be much, much, much better. But my point is that I feel that if we were to have a new system with education where there was more competition, like we were discussing earlier, but let's say the amount of money that a school gets is based on the number of students that attend that school, then maybe we could still have that free market-esque competition, but it's still being funded by the taxpayer, so that all students of any income level can still join in. Because I feel that students, children's education should not be determined by, let's say, the income level of their parents. Because again, we want equality of opportunity. Every individual should have equal opportunity, and then they choose if they want to work hard, if they want to excel in our capitalist world. And on top of that, I feel that they should also have choice of job regardless of income. So even if someone comes from a low income family, I feel that it would be not the best for them to be confined to only, let's say, options of trade. Let's say someone of low income would be best suited for being, let's say, a mathematician, let's say, for example. The income level of their parents, I feel, shouldn't be holding them back from pursuing math, right? And someone of, let's say, an upper income level family shouldn't be pushed toward being a, let's say, something akin to a university academic stream, but they might want to do trades. You know, as long as every student has choice as to what pursuit they want to go through based on their motivation, then I think we'll have a cohesive society, because we want to make sure that everyone has freedom of choice, you know, has freedom of opportunity. And that's why I think, you know, having even the lowest of income people have their children educated like everyone else would ensure that equality of opportunity, because I think that's very important, you know, because I mean, there's some people who are, you know, might be low income, not because of, let's say, you know, maybe for some people it might be a matter of negligence, but for other people it might be just a matter of situation. You know, they were caught in a bad situation where they ended up, you know, losing their money, and they're in a place of poverty. That shouldn't be to the detriment of their children or their healthcare, which is why, like, even though I'm considered a conservative libertarian, like, I feel that, you know, having that, you know, access to healthcare and education is extremely important for even the lowest of income of people.
Can I just intervene real quick there, Mario?
Go ahead.
Because actually, I know exactly where you're going, but I just want to clarify this real quickly. Is I actually wholly agree with you, because as a person, like I say, that lives in the real world, the difference is, here's the problem that I think, and I think you'll come to this term. You seem like a very smart guy anyways. And like I say, this is a process every one of us have to go through. But I think the biggest issue with people that still advocate for government is they're just like religious people. They've derived a concept in mind what they think government is, but that's not a representation of reality. Reality, government is a representation of force, a monopoly of force in any geographical area. Nobody else has this pretense of authority as government. The problem with government, as you suggest, and I agree with you wholly, except for the fact that when you use it as a government initiative, there is no accountability, as we know. Like, they're the rulers. You can't hold your ruler. You're not going to hold your master to account. Okay, they're the ones that write the rules, so that's not going to happen. The problem is we got to transfer it from that top-down government model to once again more market-oriented. But I will say, first and foremost, myself, and I think most people today would admit, because of the cost structure that would be involved or entailed with actually creating a genuine education system today in the digital era, if I'm guessing off the top of my head, but I'm thinking 2-3% of an average Canadian income, adult working age people that are at least productive enough that they're generating enough income that they can afford to expend 2 or 3% of their income to help their 100%, but voluntarily. Because if I can do it voluntarily, here's the biggest issue I see when people talk about government running things is, if I, just like with anything, any product or service, if I get to exchange my support voluntarily, I have the ability to withdraw that when they're not doing anything that's conducive to what I want them to do. Like, if I'm going to pay these institutions a portion of my income, I expect them to be conducive with what, like, my morality, more ethics. And that's why private sector would be something that would be conducive to that. With government, there's no way for me to hold any of these people to account. So and I think, like I say, most Canadians, even when you're talking about healthcare, I reject the socialized healthcare system in this country completely, and not because I'm an evil like libertarian.
Right.
Like I say, I'm the kind of person I'll go help. I mean, if people knew how many people I've helped over the course of my life and how many things I've done without asking for any recognition or even now, 3 years I've been making videos, never asked for a dime. I realize that I'm lucky enough that I have enough time on my hands. I'm in enough decent situation that I can do it and help people out, and I enjoy it. So why not? It's rewarding to me, not money wise, but it's rewarding to me, and I recognize the inherent benefits that other people get, because I got to live with all these people. So I want them to be educated. I want them to be informed, just like with with healthcare. You know, if people are really desperate and they need surgery and they got no one to help them, well, they'll fucking rob you. So I want to help the people. But like I say, in this modern era, we can do this on a voluntary basis. In the past, it was much more difficult. Today, we can translate or transition into like voluntary exchanges or models where we can hold each other to account. And because we have, like I say, the age of information, social media, the minute somebody like people say, oh, but what if these private actors do something? Hello, we live in the age of information. We can hold all these people to account. We can withdraw their support. The minute you place that in the hands of government, though, once again, they're going to make sure it's conducive to, well, why do you think most people come out of education believing that government is the ultimate authority these days? Well, there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason why they reject the church or the religious institutions of the past and look to government or the courts as their moral authority. It's because the education system, the minute you place it in the hands of these people, without any ability to hold them to account, they're going to make sure it's beneficial or conducive to their particular modeling. So I'm completely on board with you 100%. I would love to, especially like you say, I think back in New Brunswick, where I'm from, in the rural communities, my goodness, I'd give not just 2 or 3%, I'll give 10, I mean, maybe even more percent of my income to help, because there's a lot of people that are so ill-informed and uneducated, and even in the big cities I see that. So I would gladly myself, and I think the majority of us would, because we recognize we all have to live with each other. So we want our neighbors, we want our people in our community to at least be smart enough to know like how to go get a job, be proficient in their lives in some way, in some capacity. So that's something we should transition towards. And once again, it allows for that accountability that I think every one of us wants.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing I take away from government. It's not that I'm not against, because I want to clarify this, because so many people say libertarians are against socialize this or socialize that because they're just greedy or selfish. It has nothing to do with that. It's always about incentive. And I know how the human mind, I know how human psychology, I know how we function. And I realize that people need proper incentives and be able to have meaning and accountability without all those other things like freedom and liberty. I say this all the time too. Freedom or liberty, it won't even exist without that personal responsibility or accountability. You can't have one without the other. So once again, it just, to me, allowing voluntary choice is the best way that we can make sure that even those people that desperately need help aren't just running through this education system. And because a lot of them, and you probably recognize, a lot of the kids, especially like from elementary school on up into high school, a lot of them are just shoved through the door. Even when I was younger, my brother graduated grade 12. I dropped out in grade 9 and I went to work, but my brother graduated grade 12, but at like, what was it? General. If you showed up, like you were good to go. And I thought, did they really get? No, it was just, they were sitting place holders in a seat somewhere. It wasn't a benefit to them.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I know you were going to talk about some of the comments that were there that you want to go over, and and thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of like to throw in my last thoughts on our discussion thus far. And I know for the sake of time, we should probably go toward the wrap up with the comments. I mean, I know there's things, there's probably other things I want to say, some things you want to say, but maybe we could probably continue this maybe in another video if you're up for it. I'm totally up for it too. Yeah, we could do that. But yeah, I agree that for the sake of time, I understand that probably to focus on the comments for now. So I appreciate you letting me have that opportunity. Thank you.
No problem, Mario. Actually, like I say, I'm very appreciative to have you on, and we'll definitely do this again anytime you want. You just let me know, and we'll do this again. So the big thing, because as a libertarian, I kind of expected this would probably be brought up when you mentioned it earlier. But let me see if it's still on it. It might have scrolled down further past.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. Oh yeah. It was a Calgary Jaybird. he had said, or he or she, there's not, I don't know. But anyways, this guy is ignorant to anarchy. Anarchy is without ruler, not without rule. Now, I've actually understood that earlier on, but I just want to give you a chance if you want to respond to that. But I'll just say first and foremost, I think the big thing that people don't, I've understood both sides of that too, where the people say, because anarchy is like the absence of rulers. The problem though that I've seen myself personally is people that come from like an atheist background, they seem to be more conducive with that pure anarchy where they think that there's no rules. But I guess people like myself that come from like a Christian background, yes, I still reject rulers, but I understand you need rules. The problem is that where do those rules come from? So under anarchy, I get what they're saying with the argument. Well, it's not a matter of no rules, it's just no rulers, but who's making up the rules? But I don't know if you wanted to reference that or not.
Yeah, sure. So basically, okay, I can understand that. But the thing is, first off, I find anarchy to be kind of like a paradox in itself, because the thing is that when you have, like, let's say a landmass area, let's say an area where it's let's say anarchy, and there's no rulers, that's just going to be a vacuum for someone to become a ruler of that area, and then anarchy is suddenly gone after. So like it comes down to who of the area of the people that are in, let's say, this anarchist place of land. Someone is going to have the potential to rule it and erect their own sense of government there in the end. Unless the only way we can avoid this is where everyone collectively were to be like, okay, no rulers with anyone. No one can be a ruler here. But then again, that's another sense of authority. Where is this authority coming from? Like if every single human individual were to, put this together, like have that one rule. I mean, now there's a rule. I mean, yeah, okay, fine. I see where this person is saying, like anarchy is not a matter of no rules; it's a matter of having no ruler, right? But I mean, it's going to be tricky because again, how are you going to enforce that rule? The best case scenario is for everyone like at the same time to enforce that rule, which I think would be great. But again, that's going to be very, very tricky. But at the same time, I feel that again. As like I guess this is where my progressive side comes in, because yeah, I'm conservative, I'm a libertarian, but I'm also, I guess, a bit of an idealist and a progressive. Like I might as well just call myself for how the definitions that I associate myself with, I guess. And I'm not to say that this person that commented is wrong or that anything they're saying is incompatible, it's bad. No, this is the beauty of the fact that we have freedom of speech in our countries. The fact that we're able to share different opinions, like this person here in the comment feed is saying that anarchy might, like, I think they're implying that anarchy might be a viable form of a way of life, let's say, for example. I may not necessarily agree with that. I feel that maybe having some sort of accountability with regards to, let's say, healthcare and education in the form of taxpayer money, like that might be a necessity as of right now. But maybe I could be completely wrong, where we don't need that, and we could just put that to the free market. I think that would be great. But at the same time, I feel like we need to kind of grow in a cautious and slow manner in a lot of regards. That way, we figure out the best way forward. Because like if we're too radical in our approach, if like I remember your slogan, Bennett, you were saying that you believe in evolution, not revolution, right? I feel that an iterative evolution would be beneficial to our society, but a radical revolution might it's like high risk, high reward. You'll either get like something really good or something really bad, right? And we want to avoid the really bad because we don't want a famine. We don't want something that happened like with the communist revolution. Like we want to avoid that. Like that, I think that's awful. Like what happened, like millions of people starved, under Stalin. We want to avoid that. Any of the rulers that have like allowed awful things to happen, Stalin, Hitler, Mao, so like we want to avoid that. So I'm happy that this commenter gave their opinion on this, and it's definitely valid. It's definitely valid, and I'm open to further conversation about it. So I appreciate their comment on that and letting me know their thoughts. I'm always open to different things that people have to say, because I mean it's part of our growth as human individuals, as I'm sure you would concur with that.
Yeah, actually, what I love about when I hear things like that, and even like you and I talk about this stuff, is it's perfectly alludes to the fact that none of us have this. Like, I wish somebody had the magic answer that was going to fit.
Yeah.
There is. That's the beautiful that. But once again, And the absence of that one size fits all, which has never worked in human history. I mean, I don't know at some point in time in the future if the human intellect will advance to the point, and you were kind of alluding to that earlier, where we're kind of like in that teen stage of human evolution process as far as understanding how we should socially and economically deal with each other, cohabitate, coexist. We are in that teen stages. But yes, I believe that at some point in time we might get to that point. But in the absence of that, like I say, under anarchy or any kind of structure, there's going to have to be rules. We don't want rulers. I think we would all agree that we don't want rulers. But even modern democracies were never set up to have rulers. They were set up to give. Predominantly, historically, it was mostly the upper class, the aristocrats that had.
Right.
But I think that's the thing. Humanity's getting away. Think about it. If you think about the human advancement, right? We went away from full-on top-down mysticism and collectivism and authoritarianism, right?
Yeah.
Dictates of monarchs and pharaohs and stuff, to understand that we needed democracy. So, like I say, the middle class, the educated, the well-informed. But we're seeing today in the information age, now we can that's going to trickle down to eventually encompass every single one of us. And that's the beautiful thing is I don't have all the answers. Mario doesn't have all the answers. Having these kinds of conversations and having all these people that are paying attention to us right now, like I say, there might be even someone in this chat right now that's thought of something else just by something that we've said, might have sparked an idea in their mind. They might offer that as something that's going to benefit humanity going forward. I don't know. I just say that I'm going to offer what I have to say. Mario's offering what he's got to say. I don't know it all. Mario don't know it all. And I just hope that by having these kinds of conversation or dialogue, that we can expand on the fact that, listen, just like the people in the past had to figure it out. I can't imagine being one of those people in the 1800s or post the Enlightenment era trying to figure out how we're going to set up a new form of governments and how are we going to set it up so that people are more conducive with allowing for individual freedom and liberty. It worked out great. We understand these days that, after a couple hundred years, the bad people tend to gravitate towards, if you place any arbitrary authority, the bad people will tend to gravitate towards that, right? So we understand this, but once again, the fact that we're having these kinds of conversations is telling me that humans are trying to get an escape from having this kind of top-down authoritism. So whether some people will advocate for anarchy or libertarian philosophy, such as myself, or conservative principles or values, or religious, or some of the atheists that reject the fundamental aspects of religious institutions. I get it. I understand it. But at the very least, all I want is for all of us to at least embrace the fact that as long as my main thing, the number one question I should start doing this, everyone that I talk to, is, do you want to use force or violence towards me? Because if you don't, I don't care. Then let's talk. Let's hammer out whatever, because that's really at the end of the day that it comes down to. And that's why it creates so much adversary, because when you're talking about government, because most people do understand, even in the very core of their psychology, that government is a representation of force. So when you're discussing government, I think people naturally, instinctively know that's someone that wants to point a gun and tell them how to live, right? And that's one area that, like I say, it should only be, and that's, like I say, the founding fathers of like not just Canada, but mostly predominantly the US, they understood, which is why they limited and restricted the area where government should even have as a means to invade or impose their will on the people or the populace. Yeah, it has gotten far away from that. But that's why we have to keep these kinds of intellectual discussions and knowledge. We have to keep this in the forefront of every person so that they realize that at the end of the day, just like if you had two warring parents that were battling, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, they're either going to get a divorce and walk away, or if they're going to live together, they're going to say, well, the only way we're going to be able to live together is if we create some foundational rules that we both abide by and treat each other with respect. After all this is said and done, like, I don't know how long it's going to take, but that's at what point we're going to get to here eventually. We're going to go through a lot of, the trials and tribulations and a lot of anger and divisiveness for sure. But because of people like you, because of people like myself, because of lots of people that are out there today, and I'm so proud to see so many people stepping up and starting new channels and creating social media platforms and pages, because the discussion at the end of the day is what's going to help us all to be able to realize that we just got to understand each other, that we're all individuals. We all have unique characteristics. And the best thing we can do is treat each other with respect, with dignity, and have that live, let live mentality, but also hold each other to a particular standard as far as how we deal with each other when we're out there in the social and economic realm. Anyways, that's all I got to say. Sorry, I'm not trying to grandstand here or anything, but it was just something that I was thinking about, and I just felt I wanted to get it out there. But if you want to say something else, Mario, go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess one thing I wanted to talk about is, yeah, I completely agree with you, and to the audience that's watching this video, I'm completely open to being wrong again, because especially when it comes to subjective conversations, again, I tend to say this is my opinion. You know, there's always the possibility of me being wrong, and I even tell that to my students. I'm like, you know what? I'm not, the authority for everything. Like if it comes to, let's say, stuff to do with computer science, like, okay, this is an if statement, this is a loop, this is how you do a loop. Like, yeah, that's more in the lines of like, okay, this is what you need to know in order to excel in the career of computer science or game development or whatnot, right? But if it comes to, let's say, opinion-based things, like, let's say, things to do with geopolitics or international business or like anything that's subjective, like I will tell the students, like, listen, I'm open to hearing what you have to say. This is my opinion. I'm open to being wrong. In fact, I'll be happy if you prove me wrong, because then I'll be able to learn, and all the other students will be able to learn. So like I actually challenge my students. I'm like, prove me wrong. I want you to prove me wrong. I am open to you proving me wrong. I think that would be great for our education system, is for the teachers to be proven wrong, but only if that it's backed not by emotion but by facts and logic and whatnot, right? And we need to have that mutual respect in order to build one another. And that's where I think active listening is a very, very important thing, especially in conversation, because if anyone watches the video between Jordan Peterson and Kathy Newman, Kathy was just trying to, like, from my perspective, Kathy was trying to rip Jordan Peterson apart, trying to misconstrue what he was saying, and he would have to rebound and rebound and rebound. I felt that Kathy was not trying to understand what Jordan Peterson meant. She was trying, like, I felt like she was taking it from, like, she would hear what he had to say, and then construed in a way that was very different from what it seemed like he was intending, to try to throw him off, right? But he would rebound after. And I felt like what Kathy Newman was doing wasn't necessarily conductive to a progressional and iterative conversation, because I felt like rather than trying to understand what he's trying to say, she's trying to rip him down. That's my opinion. That's what I got from that conversation, And you can see that in politics a lot. You have like a whole bunch of people, like, let's say, whether it's the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, they focus on ripping each other down instead of trying to build each other up and trying to listen to what they're trying to say. Like, for example, let's say for healthcare, for example, like there's some people who believe in taxpayer healthcare, and some people who believe that government should not be involved in it, and that healthcare should be paid for by the patient, right? It would be not conducted to a healthy conversation if someone hearing that, let's say from the left, would be like, oh, you don't want taxpayer-funded government, single-payer healthcare? You must hate poor people. You must hate poor people or whatever. Like, no, like, that's not how you do a conversation. You have to try and understand where they're coming from and assume the better of them and think, okay, you know what? If this person doesn't believe in a government paid or taxpayer paid healthcare, maybe it's not because they hate poor people. Maybe it's because they just have a different idea as to how to go about how to bring more healthcare to the people that's of better quality. Because as of right now, like, I know this is off topic, but like, healthcare in Canada isn't the best. Okay, it could be much better. Much better. There's waiting lines. People are dying in the waiting room, which is awful. And I can see this as a Canadian. So I think it would be not great to assume the worst of your political opponent, but instead to listen to one another. And I feel that people on the left, I mean, maybe I'm biased because I lean more to the right, but I feel people on the left can really engage in active listening and try to understand what they're trying to say and help them understand what they're trying to say. I feel that in conversation, we need to try and help the other person say what they want to say. And if something sounds confusing, we can ask them for clarification and say, so I'm a little bit confused. Do you mean this or do you mean that? To help them say what they have to say. I feel active listening is extremely important in conversation and learning from one another. Hello, are you there? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, are you there?
So, yeah, well, just once again, I'll just preface real
Hello?
quick here before we tie this up, that sorry to the folks into these kinds of discussions, and I do tend to get into that, folks. I'm sorry, because I know I mentioned it, but like I say, when I get in these discussions, like Mario.
Hello. 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 Hi.
Hello?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Are you still there?
Hello.
Well, now I'm here. Now I'm getting 3 people here for some reason.
Oh.
There was an error loading your app. What's going on here?
Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry about that. I guess the internet kind of conked out. Was there any part of my explanation that got cut off?
I'm not 100% sure. It literally just, no, it was while I was talking. So I think we're okay, but everything's it's saying right now there was an error loading your app. The app couldn't I'm not seeing you now. I'm just seeing myself down there. So something has definitely happened here.
Yeah.
But it's still showing. I'm just going. Anyways, like I say, I really appreciate you having this conversation, Marion. We'll definitely do maybe deal with different areas or any topic. Like I say, I'm always open to discuss pretty much anything because I'm all about knowledge. Like you were saying earlier, like, yeah, I don't come at people just to be adversarial for the sake of being adversarial. I actually am genuinely curious to hear what you got to say. I'm like Kathy Newman. Right? I actually care about what you're saying. I'm not just trying to get you in a gotcha moment. Right?
Yeah, no, I know. No, believe me. I didn't mean to insinuate that you were. I was
no,
just saying,
I know, and you weren't. But that's what I'm just adding that. But no, I'm not even insinuating that you were. But yeah, I'm like you. I'm of the same mindset as you. I want to hear what people say. I can't stand people that they get automatically just adversarial for the sake of being adversarial. Like that's not helping anyone as far as I'm concerned.
I agree 100%.
But anyways, Mario, I'm gonna let you go, man, because like I say, things are getting a little. I don't even see anymore here, but it does show we're live, so I'm going to tie this up. But once again, I appreciate you having this conversation. Reach out to me anytime you want, and we'll do this again at some point in time in the future. Okay?
Perfect. Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me on your channel. I really appreciate it. It was a great privilege, and I thank you so much for having me here. Thank you. All the best.
All right, Mario. Have a good one, man. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, everyone. So that was a great conversation with Mario Greco in regards to education, which I'm very much appreciative to have someone on to actually discuss education. Is obviously it's a topic that is important, especially for the younger people. And you got a whole lot of people coming up below the millennials now, Gen Zers, right, that are going to be entering into or are already entered in the education system. And this is the kind of information that hopefully can be shared to them as well, so they can start to think a little bit. And yeah, you don't have to worry about the one size fits all approach anymore. Even if you are stuck in the public education system, you can still get a whole lot more knowledge and education outside in the age of information. Anyways, we'll see you in the next time. I have a next great chat, and I'll be announcing that. Actually, I have another announcement I'm not even going to say right now, but I have a really important announcement that I'll be putting out probably within the next week or two. But things are definitely looking up here, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of 19 and especially October. Anyways, it's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.